Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver and Bob.
Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. We are currently in the middle of our Shocktober mini-series, in which we are covering a whole range of new releases and other horror-related items in the build-up towards Halloween. And this week, it's going to be a particularly epic episode in which we cover this year's BFI London Film Festival. For anyone who doesn't know, the London Film Festival, it runs every October. It lasts roughly 12 days, and there is a multitude of movies. This year, there were 225 feature films from 77 different countries playing across 14 cinemas in central London over 12 days. Pretty epic. So it's impossible to be able to watch all of them, but we've tried our best to see at least every sort of horror genre cult movie. So this episode is going to be a little roundup, purely spoiler free, and we are going to be recommending some of our favourites from the festival. And I also got the chance to chat to a couple of filmmakers for the podcast. So you're going to hear a little snippet of my chat with film director S. Craig Zahler, who previously had made Bone Tomahawk and Brawl in Cell Block 99, and he talks about his new film, Dragged Across Concrete. And then towards the end of the podcast, you're also going to hear a little snippet of my chat with Barbarian Sound Studio director Peter Strickland, and he is going to be talking about his new film, a kind of strange art house horror comedy called In Fabric. So absolutely loads of stuff to cover. So let's get started. Joining me to discuss all things LFF, my podcasting partner in crime, it's Brad Hanson. Brad, hello.
Hello.
Hello. This is lovely. We've got a nice little setup in here. It's like a little picnic going on. I'm loving this.
I know. I've brought along donuts and crisps.
It's as if we're going to be here for like the next 24 hours or something.
We
which
are.
We very well might be. Obviously, we're here to talk about London Film Festival. This year. We're pretty much at the end of it now, at the point we're recording this. What's your tally up to right now? How many films have you seen?
I am up to 42.
Holy shit. That's across 10 days. I suppose across 10 days that isn't too
It's-
bad, is it?
yeah.
That averages out about 4 movies a day.
Yeah, I've had some bad days, but I've also took some self-care days.
You need it, to be honest.
I keep missing the early film ones because I don't wake up in time. They've been nightmares.
It's mental, yeah. So we should say, like, for press, and this is going to sound like a real kind of poor us moment here, because we are very lucky because we've got free press passes to see everything. But it's essentially like the big film. Each night there's a premiere, isn't there? Basically, there's a big gala premiere, and the morning of that day is when they screen it for press, and they screen it at about 8:30, 8:45 a.m. start. And it's kind of first come, first serve, isn't it, for
and the
press?
queues are mad.
Oh my! It's never been so bad as well as it has been this year. So yeah, people have been getting there from sort of 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m. to go and see Beale Street or whatever it might be. Yeah, it's been ridiculous. So yeah, not much sleep, but it's been good fun. How do you think the quality overall has been this year?
I've only seen 2 turkeys, like 2 films I intensely disliked.
Yeah.
Everything else has ranged from solid to brilliant.
Amazing.
Of the big batch. So I mean, obviously I did my research because I didn't want to waste my time on stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there are a lot more turkeys out there than I've seen, but so far I've only got caught with 2.
That's it. And actually, usually the quality overall at LFF is not terrible. Like compared to something like Fright Fest, for example, where you get some great ones and you get some absolute garbage. Usually with LFF, you can guarantee it's going to be of a certain quality, I suppose.
Absolutely, and it's really good for us outside of the sort of cult and horror section to basically take a gander at everything that's going to be pretty much vying for the best pictures and Oscars and Academy Award, all that sort of stuff. So it's been good to get a head start on that. Because it frees up our Januaries.
It does, yeah, because this is it. It's basically like award season kicks off really from now, doesn't it? And what do you think? Like, what's your early prediction for sort of best picture winner? Do you think we've seen it already?
I think I may have seen it.
Yeah.
I think I've seen 2 films that I think, or 3 films I lie, that could win it, which would be Yorgos Lanthimos' The Favourite.
Yes.
I also think that If Beale Street Could Talk, the new Barry Jenkins, is in with a very good shout, and also Alfonso Cuarón's Roma.
Oh yeah, which is actually coming to Netflix, isn't it? So
yeah, it's a travesty that's not going to be seen in many cinema screens. I think Curzon will probably do a day and date release with the Netflix. I know they're doing that for Outlaw King and a few other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
It's a travesty that it's not getting a big...
It's crazy. It feels like Netflix have bought quite a lot of movies this year as well, with the awardsy ones.
Mostly good stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that they're releasing, it's all ranging between brilliant and good.
Yeah.
So.
The new Coen Brothers film even that screened at LFF, Netflix have got that. So that people will be able to watch that at home in the next couple of months, won't they?
Not even that. I think it's November. I think it's next month.
There you go.
Which is crazy.
There you go.
But yeah, that's definitely worth a watch. Outlaw King is solid.
Yeah.
Not spectacular, but you do see Chris Pine's dick, so
well, there you go.
There you go. You're sold, right?
It's the sort of thing people go, well, it's a very brave performance. He gave very, very brave.
He came out of a very cold lake.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Very brave.
So,
very brave.
Oof.
Yeah. It's like the ladies in Blue is the Warmest Colour. They were always described as very brave performances. Very brave. Michael Fassbender and Shame, very brave.
Very brave.
All very brave performances. So we're going to get onto obviously the horror movies in a minute. But what has been your favourite overall? Setting aside the horror and cult stuff that we're about to talk about.
I think it's the three that I've just mentioned.
Yeah.
It's hard to separate them. They're all very different movies, but I think they're all phenomenal. So that would be the favourite, If Beale Street Could Talk and Roma.
I've got to admit, I haven't seen Roma and I haven't seen Beale Street, both of which I think I slept in and missed.
Yeah, you text me saying, I missed Beale Street, and I was like, no.
I'm genuinely gutted I missed Beale Street, but I thought Roma, as much as it probably would have been better to watch on a big screen, I thought, I'll catch it on Netflix in a couple of months.
You definitely will.
And hopefully, and the same with the Coen Brothers, I was like, I'll wait for Netflix, it's fine. But I agree with you about the favourite. It is my favourite.
We sat next to each other watching it and both just squealing.
Laughed our asses off the whole way through.
I think it's amazing that he's somehow made a film about Queen Anne, who was a really rich and interesting character, but shot it like a skateboard video. Like, I don't know. He's such a lunatic, like what he does.
So
those pan tracking shots.
Oh, it's amazing.
Something like you've never seen. It's amazing.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Yorgos Lanthimos, he directed A Killing of a Sacred Deer last year, which was, I suppose, more of a kind of genre horror movie in a way. And then the year before that, or a couple of years before that, The Lobster as well. And Dogtooth, wasn't it, before that? Well, amazing. What an amazing... I mean, he is fast becoming my favourite director.
He's carving out. I mean, it's like relationship ended with Guadagnino.
Yeah.
Now... Yorgos is my best friend.
He really is. He has just got such kind of biting wit and so much style and stuff as well. It's just brilliant. Yeah,
he's amazing.
Absolutely love it. But not really a horror film, so we're going to set that one aside for now.
As much as we'd love to chat.
Exactly. So we're going to talk mainly about a couple of the big sort of gala films were sort of fall under the category of horror genre movies, but mostly they sort of came in the cult category. The London Film Festival was separated into different categories with quite kind of odd titles. There's like the thrill movies. There's the Dare, Create. There's what's the one that's like debate
Journey.
Movies, Journey, Laugh. Essentially split into different genres. And there's one that Michael Blythe is the main programmer for. Michael Blythe, who's been on this podcast many times. He runs the cult strand, and it's I think 9 or 10 movies in the cult strand, and they're all 11. There you go, and they're all essentially kind of horror, fantasy, sci-fi genre type movies, aren't they?
Yeah, they're not all intrinsically horror movies, but they're all genre pictures of some ilk.
So we're going to sort of basically go through all of them and then a couple of the other biggies as well that played. Overall, were you impressed with the cult strand?
I spoke to Michael about this last night after wrapping up my final cult strand film, which I'm very proud that I managed to get through all of them.
Yes.
And said that the quality of the films that he selected, I think overall are second to none. Like I can't think of anything that he missed aside Halloween.
Yeah.
And there was no point because it was coming out now anyway.
Yeah, it came out in the middle of the festival.
I think the sort of breadth of his programming, giving everyone a little bit of something for everyone in everything he does. I think it's been some inspired choices and films that took that I'd never heard of and that came out of me from left field. That I think he's found some real gems.
That is what I love about it as well. Like I tend to, same with Fright Fest and other film festivals, I go in a bit blind a lot of the time and I just like, right, what's this going to give me? And some of them were totally unusual and out there. But yeah, I would say, I think overall it's been the best quality that it's been for at least the years that I've been going to this festival.
I would say over the last 4 years. I think strength, normally there's a couple that do not work for me at all. But I found value in everything that he's programmed this year. So hats off to Michael.
Hats off to Michael Blythe. Okay. All right, let's get into it then. So we're going to rattle through a list. Some of them we'll talk for a little bit in depth. Some of them we'll breeze over fairly quickly.
But all spoiler free.
Spoiler free for everything except for one movie which is already out there in cinemas. A lot of people have already seen Mandy, starring Nicolas Cage. So we thought we'll end with that, and we may go into a bit of spoilery depth at that one because a lot of people by now probably would have seen it. So, but we'll save that to the end anyway.
And we'll give you the warning anyway.
Okay, so we're going to start off the list with the new movie by S. Craig Zahler, which is called Dragged Across Concrete. Brad, do you want to do the honours, do a little plot synopsis for this one?
I'll do my best.
Oh, yes.
Two politically insensitive cops, shall we say.
Yeah, played by who?
Played by the inspired casting of Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn, two problematic male actors in their own realms, are suspended for excessive force on a minority.
Yes.
During a police sting or a police bust. They decide, we're not getting paid for this anymore. We're damn good at our jobs. We should make some money out of this.
Yep.
So they find themselves getting embroiled in a caper that's going on the side that they're staking out in order to reap the benefits of these criminals' hard works. But things don't quite go.
They don't.
To plan.
They don't.
And in typical Zahler fashion, it takes quite a while to get there.
In typical Zahler fashion, we've got a 2.5 hour running time and eventually lots of quite brutal violence, essentially, haven't we?
But less than anything we've seen before.
Less than his previous two movies. He's churned them out. He's done 3 movies in the space of, I think, 4 years, and they're all pretty epic. He did Bone Tomahawk a few years back. That was his first kind of big feature that he directed. And then last year, Brawl in Cell Block 99, both of which have that kind of strange, like almost difficult to categorize movies, aren't they? They're like kind of character dramas, slow burn, then they go into sort of full-on ultra violent genre territory. So in a minute I'm going to ask you your thoughts about this, and because I think this is one that is like a lot of people have been talking about it, particularly the casting of Mel Gibson and that kind of thing. We'll discuss it in just a minute, but I was lucky enough I actually got to sit down and chat to S. Craig Zahler. I got a little 15-minute interview slot with him. So I tried to kind of ask him a little bit and prod him a bit about why he chose to tell this story and also why he chose to cast Mel Gibson. So here's my chat with S. Craig Zahler. S. Craig Zahler, hello.
Hello.
This is for you. I mean, Bone Tomahawk, Brawl in Cell Block 99. It feels like you've churned these out. Sort of, what is it? 3 films in the space of 3 years, 4 years, something.
Yeah, like that? I mean, it depends on when you look at the production cycle, but it's 3 in about 3.5, 4, somewhere in there. Again, depending on what you think is the beginning. There were many false starts for Bone Tomahawk, but Brawl and Dragged really went at the times that I wanted them to go.
Incredible. So do you get much of a break between these films, or were you straight onto the next project?
So there was a break between Bone Tomahawk and Brawl and Cell Block 99 insofar as production.
Yeah.
But I remember during that period I wrote 4 screenplays and did an album and then redid a novel. So it wasn't really time off, but it was time not in film production. And then once I'd finished writing Dragged Across Concrete, then a week after that I met Vince Vaughn, cast him in Brawl and Cell Block 99. We were off to the races doing our thing, and then 5 days after I finished doing quality control on Brawl and Cell Block 99, I was off to Vancouver to start pre-production on Drag. So Brawl and Drag were pretty much back to back.
Yeah.
Whereas Bone and Brawl, I wrote a bunch of stuff and did an album in between.
Amazing. You wrote Puppet Master Littlest Reich, didn't you? Which I got to see this year.
I did.
Amazing. I loved it. And there was one moment. There were a couple in particular of the sort of death set pieces when I was like, "Oh, that's an S. Craig Zahler death scene in there."
Yeah, there are some in there. I mean, it's interesting. I'm glad that you enjoyed the piece.
Well, I mean, it does what you want from a Puppet Master film, doesn't it?
It does. I want it to do well, but it's an 84-minute version of a script that I wrote that would have been 2 hours 10 minutes.
Really,
so a lot of it didn't make it there, and I think it's pretty enjoyable the stuff that's there, and it was not really a fair production situation in terms of how fast it was and how elaborate it was. So there are There's some really enjoyable things. In particular, Cuddly Bear, that actor I really enjoyed. He was my favorite character in the script, and then they put that Skeeter Jenkins in there, and it really went to the next level. A lot of fun people in that cast.
I was just impressed by some of the. There's a scene involving somebody stood in front of the toilet getting decapitated.
The very that was from the script, but I give credit where credit's due. Always the very end of that moment. I don't know how explicit we want to get.
We can be as explicit as you want.
Okay, when the man is actually urinating on his own head, that they came up with on the set, and that was not in the script.
That was not you.
That was not. His head came off, but that he was urinating on his. That was I believe Dallas Saunier came up with that little gem.
I love it.
So I am never one to take credit for anything that's not mine. So that elaboration was his.
I love it. So it's interesting you said, actually, because that originally might have been a sort of 2 hour plus movie.
Yes.
Is that something that you, I mean, obviously, you must have pretty much, do you have complete control over your movies that you direct? That you don't sort of get pressured to cut them down by studios?
Correct. And that's the only way that I would do them. I mean, certainly there are much more commercial versions of all three of these movies than the ones that I'm putting out there. And I understand that, and for people who are driven by money, this would be a wasted opportunity. But I had a pretty good life for about 9 years as a catering chef who played death metal and wrote fantasy books.
Yeah.
So when I transitioned into this life, I quickly, one of the better things about making a lot more money is not really thinking about money that much. So it quickly became something that wasn't a motivating factor, which isn't to say it's completely irrelevant. But I'm not going to make a creative decision on a movie that I work on for a year of my life for any monetary consideration. For me to put that much of my life into a project, I couldn't be concerned that at the end of that process, some dude is going to walk in and say, I think this is boring, and I'll have to do anything about it. It's just not something I understand. And again, if you need $100 million to make your movie, then you need to embrace the studio machine and be open to that. I'll work within the walls that my creative control builds.
Yeah,
that's how it's going to be. If this is the biggest budget movie I ever work on, I'll learn to work in this sphere in terms of retaining this kind of control.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the thing now. After these three movies, I think, people who are fans of your work know what they're getting now from an S. Craig Zahler movie,
right.
And it's not always
you
going to be...
You won't expect what you're getting on the next one. But
oh,
yes,
really?
Yes.
Anything you can tell me about that? Yeah.
So this is my latest novel, Hug Chicken Penny, the panegyric of an anomalous child. I know, just rolls off the tongue.
Even the title is long. I love it.
So when I originally conceived this character, which was more than 20 years ago, I was reading a lot of Charles Dickens at the time. So that's in there.
Right.
And some kind of David Lynch stuff is in there, and Mervyn Peake. And I think Tim Burton comparisons will come up just because it has such a gothic sensibility.
Right.
So this will be a black and white movie. It will be much longer than Dragged Across Concrete, believe it or not. And the titular character, Hug Chicken Penny, is going to be an animatronic puppet. We've already partnered with the Jim Henson Company. So be building that character with them. You will also see Vince Vaughn, Fred Melamed, Jennifer Carpenter, Udo Kier, Don Johnson. All of them have roles in it.
Fantastic.
And it's a really different piece. It's a gothic orphan's tale.
Amazing.
Probably PG and black and white, and just a very different kind of thing.
It's interesting. I mean, we're a sort of horror and genre movie podcast here.
Yep.
And do you kind of consider any of your movies are hard to categorize, I suppose, in a way,
Sure.
deliberately so. Would you ever consider doing a straight up kind of horror movie or anything?
100%. Sure.
Yeah.
The Bone Tomahawk was a left turn from the horror movie that I intended to make, which
Right.
I was watching a lot of indie horror. When I say indie horror, I mean regional horror where someone is making it for $5,000 in their basement. I actually have a column called "Malignant Growths" in Fangoria.
Oh, cool.
Which my producing partner has just resurrected that magazine.
Yeah.
And so my column is about these indie horror pieces, which are $2,000 made in a factory district somewhere in Russia, or here in the swamps of Sweden for $1,000, or over in Sekonk, or over in New Jersey or wherever. And these people are just getting together whatever they can. Sometimes it's their friends and family members, whoever acted at their school, and they make these low-budget pieces. And there's so much heart, and you'll need to look past some technical flaws. But I was watching so many of those, I said, I'm going to make one of these. Now, at that time, I'd sold a lot of screenplays, so I was figuring I would probably make like $50,000-$60,000 version of one of those.
Yeah.
And I'd pitched that to Dallas Saunier and my agent, and they said, well, if you made a horror, if you wrote a Western, like all of your other Westerns that kind of set up your career, we could probably get this financed at a different level. And I think of genres that I've written, I'm maybe most comfortable writing Westerns, maybe Westerns and crime. I've written a lot of both. And there's always a horror component to it.
Definitely.
But that was the left turn. The horror piece that I was going to write is called Flesh Beneath the Pavement. And someday I'll return to that. I don't know if that will be a book. I don't know if that will be just a straight horror movie that I do or both. But I have an interest in doing straight horror. But I'm very interested in doing it. And obviously horror as well as comedy is woven throughout all of my pieces. An interesting thing about horror always is kind of unlike a lot of other genres, that really is a genre that can get further on concept and word of mouth than most.
Yeah, that's true.
Like if you just do a drama with a bunch of people nobody's ever heard of, but it's really good, I'm not sure how you're marketing that. And if you just, do like a low-key crime piece with a bunch of people nobody's ever heard of, maybe easier to market than the drama, but not like a horror movie.
No.
I mean, you look at something like Blair Witch, for instance, and just the way that thing blew up on the word of mouth. So I think that's one of the strengths of horror is that kind of concept and word of mouth can get it out there without the star power. It doesn't necessarily require that. And
yeah, that's true. Genre fans will go see it regardless.
Yeah, they'll go see it. Like it's not like, well, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go see this new horror movie that I'm interested in because there isn't a major star in it. I want to go see this possession movie or this ghost movie or this slasher movie. This kind of movie, that's something that I tend to enjoy.
Absolutely, yeah. So tell me a little bit about Dragged Across Concrete then. For people listening to this who don't know yet, just haven't seen it, just give me a little bit of the sort of plot setup and what we can expect from this movie.
Yeah, you can expect surprises, so I guess that doesn't really tell you much. But it starts out, there are three protagonists. Two of them are policemen, one played by Vince Vaughn and one played by Mel Gibson. And then the third protagonist is Henry Johns, recently out of prison, played by Tori Kittles. And all of these people at the beginning of this movie are facing economic hardship and all have dealings with the criminal underworld and decide to go into the criminal underworld to better their situations. So I would really like not to give away more than that. It's tough to discuss because it's a movie that does have a lot of turns.
It does.
But discussing, even at the halfway point exactly what's going on as a turn, I'm loath to give away.
Definitely. It's lovely to not know what you're in for, I think, when you sit and watch the movie. But what I love as well, actually, is that it felt like in this movie there was more focus on the moments between the plot moments, if that makes sense. We're spending time with characters talking or whatever. Again, is that something that seems to be quite prevalent in a lot of your writing? Is that something that you're that's important to you? Yeah,
it's extremely important. And I'd say this is probably one of the reasons why I am not studio friendly and where I diverge most from what's going to get through the system is I think a lot of those moments are more interesting than the plot moments. Yeah. The plot is the road that takes you from A to B to C. Now, the plot in Dragged Across Concrete is more complicated than it is in my other movies, but it's still taking you somewhere. Yeah. And so what are you doing on that? What are you doing on that journey? And getting different shades of the characters and getting senses of their history between Henry Johns and Biscuit, between Anthony Lurisetti and Ridgman, between Ridgman and his wife, Anthony and the jeweler, Anthony and his girlfriend, and getting a real sense of the world and that it is larger than just the plot of the movie. So those are the first things that go away when you develop something in a studio. Of course, and I know, having fought many battles with multiple pieces of mine at multiple different studios, is they want everything to move stuff forward. And I'm like, but it's going to be better to watch a guy eat a sopressata sandwich for 2 minutes.
I was just about to ask you about that moment.
Than it is to just go on to the next thing. Because this is a unique experience you're having sitting in the theater and sitting in that car, smelling that sandwich with these guys.
Yeah.
That if you just got the short version of it, wouldn't be memorable, and no one would ask me about it, and no one would write about it, and no one would recall it afterwards. Whereas many people ask about it or write about it or recall it afterwards.
Absolutely, yeah. God, I wanted that sandwich. It looked amazing.
Yeah, I editing. Whenever I knew I was going to be working on that scene in the editing room, I made sure I had a sandwich handy. It's pretty hard to look at that scene for 5, 6, 7 hours and not want to eat one.
Definitely. Tell me, because you mentioned you wrote this before Cell Block 99. Is that right?
I wrote this before I went into production for Cell Block 99.
Right, gotcha.
So it was, Brawl and Cell Block 99 and Bone Tomahawk were 2010, 2011,
Right.
like the beginning of 2011 or the end of the previous year. But Dragged Across Concrete I wrote in 2016.
Okay.
So there were a lot of scripts and some novels and albums in between those.
Yeah. So it's still fairly recent. Because I was going to say it feels like a movie that it in some ways feels quite relevant to 2018. There are conversations that characters have at the beginning of, you've got to be so careful now with what might get caught on camera, with how easily people can villainize you.
Right, and it was 2016. It actually has become more relevant since I wrote it.
Yeah. I mean, do you kind of have that in mind when you write stories like this? It kind of, it feels to me like is it reflecting on the kind of current political climate and what's going on out there?
I'm not a political person. I just don't come from that place with writing.
Right.
I in terms of this piece, I see how the climate, I mean, again, I wrote it in 2016, so a lot of the kind of the worst stuff and the most aggressive stuff and empowering stuff and the whole spectrum has really happened since then. But I didn't change a word of the script to really suit that or make it go down easier, as obviously some people will be uncomfortable with some of that stuff. But I mean, some of it is just a sense of these guys in this world where they don't really feel so much a part of it and a little bit left behind. And I mean, you get some of this said literally by Don Johnson, their boss.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of situation where you're trying to write something that's true to the world and true to the characters. And now, I wrote it in 2016. A lot of people would think it applies now more than it did then.
Yeah.
And Brawl and Cell Block 99, which I wrote in 2010, all these people thought it had to do with the current political state of 2016 and 17. I wrote it in 2010, didn't change anything.
Yeah.
So I think there's something, I mean, this is something that's kind of cool and interesting, which is if you write something and the world is true to itself and the people are behaving in a certain way to bad situations and interacting in a certain way, that you could apply it to a bunch of different situations. I always remember seeing some review of one of my books, Wraiths of the Broken Land, and someone talked about how this is, clearly this allegory of the Spanish-American War, about which I know nothing.
Yes.
But it's interesting that can happen. And I saw with Bone Tomahawk, people were making all these Al-Qaeda comparisons.
Right,
A name I did not know when I wrote that screenplay.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's something interesting. I mean, I'm not gearing these pieces for the release. I'm writing it and trying to make it as interesting as possible, but that it will connect to some political situation or something, somebody's personal experience at different times is cool. And this is the final process of any piece of art.
Yeah.
Is I've guided it all the way, but the last part I don't guide it. That's an experience between somebody I probably don't know with the piece in a room that's a theater or on the television, or if they're reading a book, looking at the book. And that last part is a personal thing.
Yeah.
And whatever has happened in your life, that some of that is going to be applied to the reading experience.
Definitely.
It's why there are people who really enjoy what I do and people who don't.
The same can be applied for the casting of Mel Gibson, obviously,
Sure.
as well, which I'm sure, he's playing a character who is set up at the beginning, who is somebody who has maybe made some mistakes in his life, maybe villainized.
Right.
He is maybe racially insensitive, this kind of thing.
Right.
It is all kind of set up at the beginning. And I just wondered, was there any reason for casting Mel Gibson in that role, or was it purely just for him as a performer.
It was for him as a performer. I was one of the things that the only thing in terms of what you're asking about that I hoped was that all of the conversation about the picture wouldn't be these overlaps, because again, this character was written without him in mind.
Right.
And in 2016, before I even knew Vince, much less Vince, who had introduced me to Mel Gibson and kind of facilitated this whole thing. So I didn't change a line of it because he was in the role to better suit him or to be, like really to alter. This is how I saw the character. And he understood the character and saw, whatever differences and overlaps and approached it that way. But I was certainly aware that this question would come up, of course, and there's no way that it won't. But my hope is that people look at the piece and the world of the piece and the characters, and that it wouldn't like talking about somebody's personal life or it wouldn't detract from actually getting into the piece itself and having that specific reaction to the fiction that we've created.
But, I suppose people are always going to make assumptions about that kind of thing, and your films are always quite provocative, I suppose, in some way or another. And is there ever that temptation to want to provoke by casting somebody like Mel Gibson? I mean, is there any thought in that?
No, the reality is there was no intention of me wanting to provoke. I put him in because he's a great performer. Yeah. And again, it was kind of the opposite. Like, I hoped there wouldn't be too much conversation about any parallels or his personal life, because I'm not really going to discuss the personal lives of actors. Some of the actors in my movies I've become friends with. I had a very good working relationship with him and would work with him again. But that's the kind of thing where ultimately I just wouldn't want that to be the headline. But for some people it will be the headline, and they're entitled, to have that opinion and to look at it that way. I get it. Everyone's different.
The kind of the violence and the gore and that kind of thing. How do you is it all practical effects? It always looks.
It's all practical.
Love it. I 100%. Love that kind of thing. So you avoid CGI, I guess.
I do, and. Which isn't to say that every practical effect has landed 100% where I wanted it to in all these movies, but it's my preference. I mean, the reality is, if I watch a practical effect that's a gore effect, or a CG effect that's a gore effect, I can pretty much tell that these aren't real.
Yeah.
Like, they look like, but if something isn't real and it's practical, it still feels tangible and real in a certain way. Where when it's not real and it's digital, it feels like a bunch of pixels on the screen and just nothing.
There's a moment in this film, I won't spoil it, but there's a moment in which a character has to retrieve a key.
Yes.
The entire audience I was in was just kind of like wincing and gasping. It must be great fun. Have you got a chance to sort of watch this with an audience yet?
Yeah, I've watched it with an audience a couple times, or a few times, I think 3 at this point. And the Venice premiere was cool. But and I mentioned this to you right when you came in. I just a few days ago had the American premiere at Beyond Fest, and that's become like the major genre fest in the U.S. And it was the full cast was able to get out there. Mel had a break in his pre-production, so he turned up as well. And I mean, it's like a 600-seat theater, and it sold out in 3 hours. So you have the crowd that's there that has that level of enthusiasm. That'll be a hard one to top, because it's been at this point, my favorite screening experiences of each movie. Although Venice and the Museum of Modern Art are meaningful for me in a serious, different way.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the crowd, that Beyond Fest crowd, it's fantastic.
Amazing. Fantastic. Well, before we finish, just something I ask everyone. This is a horror podcast, so I've got to ask you, what is your favorite horror movie?
Let me give you a few.
Yeah, go on.
I'll start with... these answers aren't as bizarre originally as you might hope. Night of the Living Dead.
Classic.
Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
Lost Highway.
Oh, yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Freaks.
Yeah. Amazing.
Persona, which I know someone could argue is not a horror movie, but I think it's a horror movie.
Yeah, a lot of Bergman films. I think.
Yeah. That one is quite terrifying. So I'll leave you with those. Those are favorites of mine.
Love it. Amazing. X. Craig Zahler, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the support.
Okay, so there you go. S. Craig Zahler for me is like, and this movie in particular is kind of a guilty pleasure, and I mean that not because the movies are bad as such, but I kind of feel guilty enjoying it, especially this movie, because it feels like there's a lot of problematic stuff going on in this. What did you think?
I think whether he intends to or not, I think there is a degree of stunt casting.
Yeah,
and,
I think so.
Whataboutism, you know.
Yeah.
I think he's asking some questions that I don't necessarily think need to be asked.
Yeah.
But, you know, why can't I say this word? Or why can't...
Yeah.
They don't want to be with us as much as we don't want to be with them. And looking at the racial politics of society... And I don't think that those conversations are not without merit, but I don't think he personally handles them in a particularly sensitive way.
Yeah.
It's almost Tarantino-esque.
It's super Tarantino-esque,
with
isn't
it? You know, it reminded me a lot of Django Unchained.
Yes, with his obsession with the N-word.
Exactly, which literally boils down to why can't I say the N-word? And there are many reasons why you can't.
Yeah, and also, you know, this whole, obviously I asked him a bit about this Mel Gibson thing as well, because I do think these days you don't cast Mel Gibson in a film without expecting,
Uproar.
you know, you know, and he claims that there was no reason other than he's good performer and good for the role, but you know, it almost feels like he wrote this role for Mel Gibson.
It feels like it to me, like with the you know, we can't go into details, but there are some exchanges where you're just like, that's too close to the bone for my liking. But I think as a provocateur, which I think he aspires to be,
yes, which again he denied to me in that interview, but he absolutely is, isn't he?
He's been a provocateur since day one, you know, pushing the violence envelope, pushing the misogynist envelope. You know, he's asked questions before, and I'm not necessarily saying that he's wrong for asking all of these questions.
No,
but some of the racial politics, I think there are probably better people to have this discourse than you.
Yeah, I would say so. I would definitely. But putting that aside, if we can, what did you think of this movie then, just generally as a piece?
Frustratingly, it's not a bad picture at all.
No, it's good, isn't it?
It's quite for a film that's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and I hate anything over 90 minutes. I found that it kind of breezed by.
Me too.
I didn't think it was particularly languid.
No.
I think there's some interesting dialogues and conversations and set pieces that he does put into the film. I think some do not work at all, and some are incredibly problematic. But for the most part, I think as a caper, which effectively this is what it is, I think it works well.
I think Tarantino is the best comparison as well for him, and this film as well. It reminded me of his Tarantino's 90s movies, a bit like Pulp Fiction, where like it's kind of a heist movie or it's kind of a gangster movie, but it's not so much focusing on the plot, it's focusing on the two cops on their way to the heist, or, you know, people talking about burgers in a car, or talking about, it's very much that, isn't it? It's like the conversations that go on behind the scenes.
I mean, they even have like a bagel conversation.
A whole like 2 minutes on screen of Vince Vaughn eating a sandwich and Mel Gibson watching, and that kind of thing. That for him apparently was his favourite part of the movie, you know. So
it is, like, he really went over the top with the Foley mix on that, because it's proper,
it's brilliant. Crunchy. It kind of really made me hungry, actually. It was good. You know, so were you a fan of his previous two movies as well, Bone Tomahawk and Brawl?
I like Bone Tomahawk. I loved Brawl.
Yeah, me too.
That one came out of me from nowhere. But so when I saw this was getting added, because it got added last minute.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the official program. I was really excited. And I do think it's a good, solid film. I just think it has elements of
problems,
and how many. It's not so much that those problems are there; it's why he's put them there.
Yeah,
that's my. You know, so I was speaking to Michael about this one, and I said, I'm pretty sure that Zahler voted Trump.
Oh, 100%. That's it. You feel like you're watching a film made by a Republican who's sick of PC 2018.
Exactly,
and he's fighting back against
it. Take this, snowflakes. Take this, soy beta cuck boys and all that.
He absolutely is saying that, isn't he? Was it you who's calling him the edgelord? I mean, that is essentially what he is, isn't he?
He's the 420 edgelord. he's on Xbox Live playing Fortnite.
Yeah, he's a bit
scoping people.
He's a troll a little bit, isn't he? Let's be honest.
This is a trolly film,
but he's a troll who is actually a really good filmmaker.
He's a really good filmmaker.
You can't deny it.
You can't dispute it. He's really good.
Yeah. So that was Dragged Across Concrete. Now, we know that apparently it's been picked up by Lionsgate. I'm sure it will get, you know, his previous two films have got distribution and they got release dates. It doesn't have a release date yet, but keep a lookout. It's got a new poster. It's got a new trailer. Usually that means it will be coming out over the next few months, I imagine.
I'm going to do a guess, and I'm going to say March.
March, interesting.
Mark my words.
Okay, all right, well, there you go. Listen to Brad and keep a lookout for it in March. There you go. That's Dragged Across Concrete. Okay, what have we got next? What's next on the list?
Our next topic of conversation is the Cult Gala, the headline film of the Cult Strand.
Yes.
And that is Sam Levinson's Assassination Nation.
My name is Lily Colson, and I'm 18 years old. These are my 3 best friends, Bex, and Sarah. And this is the story of how my town, Salem, lost its mind. But let's start at the beginning.
So this is the plot synopsis, according to IMDb, is after a malicious data hack exposes the secrets of the perpetually American town of Salem, chaos descends and 4 girls must fight to survive. So it's kind of like a little spin on the Salem witch trial type story, but it's very much set in 2018 of the digital age, isn't it? Basically,
it's the wokest film I think I've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, you couldn't get more opposite to S. Craig Zahler's movies.
Like if he's all about exclusion from other races, this is the most welcoming film of all time. It speaks to everyone in a certain way.
Yeah. What did you think of this movie?
Loved it.
I loved it as well. This was one of my top picks of the festival. Yeah, really good fun.
It's really fun is the right word. Like I think it balances some really interesting female politics and female identity, especially in 2018. I think it's saying some really interesting things about what are expected of women and what women should expect to get back out of this. And I think it handles it in a way that's mature, but also speaking the language of the generation that it's representing, which is obviously the disenfranchised millennial, which we'll find is a constant stream throughout a lot of these films this year. It
absolutely is, yeah.
But I think it's, as a ride, really fun. I don't think it lags at any point.
Yeah.
And it kind of, it starts as one thing and looks more at the psychological effects of living your life entirely online.
Yeah.
And then when all those, when the anonymity of that disappears and people can see your ugly truths, it descends into like Purge style.
Yeah, it's
mayhem.
It's like the best Purge movie that's never been made. It's better than the whole Purge trilogy or whatever it is now, quadrilogy.
I think it's a 5th trilogy.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, I agree. It starts off like a kind of, like you say, it's all about living online, and it's kind of sets up like a Black Mirror episode or something. What if us living on our phones triggers this downfall in society, and then it goes into full blown, like you say, Purge, almost Mad Maxy kind of dystopian territory, doesn't it?
Yeah, because there's no secrets and no lies anymore. Everyone knows the truth, and they have to hide what little shell of identity they have behind masks.
Yeah, it's terrifying, actually. I mean, that's the thing. The movie is really fun, but the idea behind it is quite dark and disturbing.
I would hate my phone.
Can you imagine? I was thinking about it, like going, this really would destroy the world. Yeah, it would destroy society. It would destroy
me. Like, if people got access to what the
none of us want to see your internet history.
No,
Brad. Yeah,
no,
that
that
doesn't need to go out to the world.
No.
But yeah, that is essentially what this film is about. It's like, what would happen if someone as perverse as Brad had his internet history go out to the world? Society itself
would crumble because everyone would be googling what I'm looking at, and then everyone's minds would be infected with this kind of carnality.
There you go. So yeah, big thumbs up for Assassination Nation, and that is going to be coming out in the UK on the 23rd of November, so not long to wait. It'll be out in a month's time,
and a proper release for that one as well.
Proper release. I'd say see it on the big screen. It's great. It's really good.
Really fun.
Okay, next on our list, this is a movie called Knife Plus Heart.
Oh, arrêtez votre charme, faites pas le coup des types, ils sont pas renseignés.
Dans 2 minutes, je veux tous à poil et au garde à vous, plus raide que Giscard. On se soulage avec la main, on est à l'aise entre copains.
So Knife Plus Heart, I guess the best way to describe it is a giallo movie, isn't it? I mean, it is literally kind of a kind of, I think, done in a very kind of non-ironic, very non-postmodern way. Like, it feels to me like it's
harking back to bygone storytelling.
Yeah, it feels like it could have been made during the 1970s almost.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been entirely surprised if it was. Basically set around a series of murders that occur during surrounded by this gay porn producer, and she's basically doing like a life imitates art style film where the murders are happening, but she's then making a film of the murders as they occur. So it's very convoluted.
But as a gay porn.
So if there are female players, they then become men, and and it does what it does. And it's playful, and it's kitsch, and it's camp, and it knows when to be silly, but it knows when to be violent. A lot of people hated it. A lot of people loved it. It was very divisive. I saw it at midnight after already seeing 5 films that day, and I still managed to get through the entire thing until 2:30 in the morning, and I didn't lull at any point, even though it does get a bit bonkers in the second act.
It really does. There's a bit of it becomes a bit of a different film in the middle there, doesn't it? But overall, it's so much fun. I loved it as well. If you're gonna I know this is what a lot of people are saying. It's like if you're gonna go see one giallo slasher gay porn art house movie, make sure it's this one.
It's got to be knife plus heart.
It's so good.
Why accept any of the rest when you can have the best? Because I'm sure there were lots of them coming out at this juncture. But it was some inspired programming from Mike, because it's something a bit different. But I think it speaks to a lot of people. I think it's a good representation, obviously, in the gay and lesbian community, to have that kind of exposure and have a whole film about, because a lot of the actors and actresses are really that persuasion. So I think that's really good. And I also think as a fun romp,
it is really fun.
Out of the films, I would say it's the rompiest.
Definitely.
Which I believe is a word.
I'd say it's rompiest. Yeah, definitely.
It's the rompiest.
Definitely. What's weird is that, it starts off as this like really kind of over stylized, like you say, kitsch, camp kind of, like romp. And then it does actually have this mystery at the center of it. So partway through, we then get into investigating properly this kind of murder mystery story, don't we?
But at the same time, you've also got a love story running throughout it as well.
Love story. It's brilliant. And it's got a dildo that turns into a knife. I mean,
what else do you need? What else do you want from us?
I don't want to spoil it, but also my favourite character was the fluffer on set as
well. But
I know.
I kind of fell in love with him a little bit, because amazing. I just wanted to give him a cuddle and say, you don't even have to fluff me. Everything's going to be all right.
It's brilliant. What do they call him? The mouth? The mouth of gold or something?
The golden mouth.
Yeah, the golden mouth.
Because he's really good at giving blowjobs.
So there you go. That gives you an indication of the tone of that film. Great. Unfortunately, we don't know anything yet about whether this has a distributor or a release date, because it's very niche, isn't
whether it will see the light of day. If I was going to, once again, speculate, I would hope that Peccadillo would pick it up.
Yes.
Perfect for them.
Yeah.
But they're not that much geared towards horror and giallo. I mean, they've done a few bits and pieces, but I think Peccadillo would be the right home for it.
Is it too out there to go on Shudder or something like that?
Shudder might have it.
Yeah.
It's a bit. I think Peccadillo would be the best home for it, because at least it'll get a cinema release and of some ilk.
Yes, yeah.
And I think it deserves. Once again, I think this is the type of film that you should watch on the big screen.
I enjoyed it so much more than I thought I was going to, in a way, because I thought it was going to be the sort of film where the gimmick ran dry after about 20 minutes, and I think for some people it did.
Yeah,
but I was totally into it. I loved it.
I think you have to buy into the world it's creating.
Yeah, you do.
But I think it premiered at Cannes, and they fucking loved it at Cannes.
Yeah, and I loved that it premiered at Cannes as well. It's brilliant.
What a place to play it.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a giallo epiphany this year. Actually, I'm starting to enjoy some of them
as a naysayer.
More. Yeah, no, it's true. I find myself kind of enjoying them more and more. So there you go. So that was Knife plus Heart. If you do get a chance, definitely seek it out. It's great fun. All right, what's next on the list?
We're going to be talking about Jonas Åkerlund's death metal or Norwegian black metal odyssey, Lords of Chaos.
Now, this was one that we were both quite excited for, weren't we?
My most anticipated.
Your most anticipated. And to be honest, I was only anticipating it because I'd heard so much buzz from people like yourself and Michael and lots of other people and reviews and that kind of thing. So basically the story, and Brad, you're probably going to know a bit more about this than me, really, but essentially the story from the official plot is that it's based on real events, and it's surrounding the Norwegian black metal band Mayhem.
Correct.
And it's all centered around this teenager played by Rory Culkin and his quest to launch this Norwegian black metal band in Oslo in the early 1990s, and it all results in some quite dark, disturbing, violent stuff that happens with all of these band members, really. So were you aware of the sort of true story behind this? I take it you were.
Absolutely, I was, yeah. So it's based off a book that came out a little while ago called Lords of Chaos. Although this particular instance is a very small part of the book. The book is about Norwegian black metal and death metal across the board, and the events that occur within this film are like maybe a chapter of it.
Right.
But the book got optioned so that they could use the title and use the likenesses and etc. etc. And basically what happened was, and this is common knowledge, so I'm allowed to say this, that Mayhem was founded by a guy called Euronius, and he was very good at self-promotion, but also he basically created this new sound of music called Norwegian black metal. And they started, he hooked up with a guy after some problems with the band called Varg Vikernes, who was also in a band called Burzum, who I really liked until I realised
what this guy Varg was like.
What he's like.
Yeah.
So they then went along burning churches. They were involved in murder. They were involved in a lot of things.
Yeah,
and
they
none of
really
this is
were.
spoilers because this is common knowledge. But the film culminates with the murder of Uranus, who's played by Rory Culkin, by Varg, and of which Varg then, in real life, spent 22 years in jail for, before then fleeing to France, where he now writes manifestos about being a Nazi.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
He's a lunatic.
Of course he is, yeah.
He doesn't approve of the film, if you're wondering.
I bet he doesn't. Yeah, I bet he doesn't, because and this is what I love. I absolutely loved this film, and you did as well, didn't you?
I did love it.
And we're coming from two opposite ends of the spectrum here, because I'd never heard of this band. I knew nothing about this story. But for me, I always think a lot of the time music biopics, which essentially this is really more than it is a horror film. I mean, it is. I suppose it's the first of its kind in that it is a kind of horror biopic, which is quite cool, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always find that music biopics often suffer with trying to tick too many boxes and hit too many beats and try and cover too much history in the space of 90 minutes or whatever. This movie felt really kind of nicely contained, and it was really just about these two characters and what they go through in this short space of time. It's
almost like a love story between the two of them, because
at
certain points you feel that there is like a genuine like attraction to each other.
Yes.
Not in a homoerotic way, just as people, there's a magnetism that works for both of them. And then to see the deterioration of that just through, feelings of inadequacy, of feelings of depression and loneliness and isolation, because they weren't the cheeriest bunch of guys.
They weren't. So are you a fan of this type of music, Norwegian black metal?
I am. It's not my favourite, but I've been listening to metal of all ilks for as long as I can remember.
What do you think about the way that they're portrayed? Basically I get from this film that these Norwegian black metal fans are essentially portrayed in this movie as either psychopath delinquents or pathetic posers, essentially, like one or the other, really. Basically. You don't really get to see many other shades.
No, but I think it's a true reflection, because a lot of people preach a certain lifestyle, a lot, with corpse paint and animal sacrifice, and they live these lives, but at the same time you see him going home and getting a plant off his mum.
Yes, it's
or
brilliant.
Like playing with his sister.
Yeah.
Like a lot of this is an act.
Yeah.
And there are very few people that truly live even in outside of the metal genre, but outside of musical genres where they really commit. And I think these boys, I think they just wanted to fit in.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that you get from this film is, first and foremost, is that it's a lot funnier than you imagine. Based on the subject matter, it's funny.
Yeah, it is funny.
But it also is a really interesting portrait of like loneliness and wanting to be accepted and to be part of a community and part of a family, even if you've got a loving network of people at home.
Yeah.
Because unless you connect and identify the same way that horror fans, like a discussion group.
Well, I was about to say there's a link, I think, as well with kind of people that are into horror movies and that kind of stuff, isn't there? Like the kind of darker side of these art forms.
Well, even in the film, they watch Brain Dead and Evil Dead in
and
segments
you see
of the
kind
film.
of horror movie posters all over their shop.
You're like, oh, Halloween. I was playing the Spot the game. I was like, oh, there's Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah. So it's about those kind of subcultures, isn't it?
It's about subcultures and how deeply invested you can get into them.
Yes.
And how, like everything, there's a jockeying and there's a ranking system, and you always want to be the person that knows the most about this, or be the best at screaming this or playing this, or in horror or in anything. Like Giles will kick the shit out of me for most things.
yeah.
So
exactly.
it hurts me that I'm not the best.
And again, you get those shades again, like with horror. You'll get the people that will maybe like the more mainstream stuff, but then you might get the ones that consider themselves more hardcore that might.
And you're all posers.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like a massive like sort of theme throughout the film.
Yeah.
But I think the important thing to take away is that it's for everyone, right?
It's great. Yeah, exactly. And actually, Rory Culkin kind of grounds it, I think, the most, because he is this like very kind of relatable in a way character, even though he's in this world that people like me know nothing about. But he was a really interesting, well played character with lots of shades to him, and I kind of started off thinking he was pathetic, to kind of disliking him, to then really feeling for him by the end as well. And
but a lot of times you see he's deeply flawed as well. Like he always wants to take credit for everything that happens. Yeah. Like, and he's always like, "Oh, yeah, I told you to do that," and you're like, "But you didn't." Totally.
But then also he's only about 19, the character in this film as well. So I'm thinking about it, they are just a bunch of teenage boys.
Yeah,
as well,
like
they?
Me at 19 was no good. You at 19 was no good. But these guys found themselves in a position of prominence, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And they did fucking mad shit because they were allowed to, because they were afforded to.
So we should say as well, it's got all these shades to it, but it's also fucking nasty at points, isn't it? And tell us about what happened in your screening.
So I was at the Prince Charles screening last night, and 3 people fainted. There is a scene which Dan Martin.
I know. So Dan Martin
alum
of the Arrow podcast and this one, he works in practical effects and does all that kind of gory, bloody effects in movies. And yeah, he worked on this one, didn't he? Yeah.
And did a bloody good job. Excuse the pun.
Literally, yeah. He did a very good job. Dan, for people who don't know, also did the practical and effects on The Human Centipede 2. So
he's well versed.
He's well versed in this kind of hardcore stuff. And I love that people fainted in this. Brilliant.
Yeah, like, because I was wondering what the commotion was, because the scene in question is a tough watch.
Because it's emotional as well, I think. Which
there's so many levels and layers to it, but I think there are, with every scene of violence within it, there are some human beats behind it that make it all the more.
Yeah.
I feel like they're the most realistic, or some of the most realistic portrayals of murder and death that I've seen in a film.
Definitely.
It's not Hollywood, it's not stylized, it's gritty, it's down, it's dirty, it takes its time.
It's like, exactly.
And you just want it to be over, and it never is.
That is what makes it hard to watch. Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, and also another little tidbit I learned last night from Jonas. I've been hearing from him a lot today. I've literally just finished listening to his screen talk as well. But one thing he did tell me is, not me personally, it's only you that talks to the celebs, no one fucking talks to me. He said that for the church burnings, what happened was, when they went to the sites where they built the church, they burnt the churches down because the Norwegian government rebuilt the churches. So they filmed all the exteriors as you would, then built miniature replicas and burnt those to the ground, but they didn't have enough wood. But there was a film shooting next door, and they borrowed some of the sets. So a lot of what you see when it's burning is the sets of Blade Runner 2049.
Amazing! Yeah. That's great. So they got to burn down the sets of Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah, so Ridley Scott's one of the producers on Lords of Chaos.
That is amazing.
And he just gave him loads of the old sets. So when you see the churches burning, it's Blade Runner sets.
That is brilliant. It's something that makes it even more kind of anarchist.
And they shot the whole film in 18 days.
This has been picked up by Arrow as its distributor, and it's going to be, well, there's no exact release date yet, but they've said early 2019 you'll get the chance to go see Lords of Chaos. And I guess it's going to come straight to DVD.
I would assume they'll do their usual Blu-ray DVD collection. Which will be extensively researched with extras that you could never imagine.
No, exactly. And you'll never have time to watch, but you know.
Yeah, but it's nice to have them.
Probably a really lovely booklet. So there you go. Lords of Chaos, big thumbs up from both of us, I think. Amazing film, so check it out. Okay, we're going to speed up now as we go on, because we've already got to nearly an hour in.
Are you joking?
Okay, all right, so moving on. Next movie is going to be, this is a French extremity film called All the Gods in the Sky. So All the Gods in the Sky is directed by somebody who just calls himself Quarks. I love that. No last name, no, just Quarks. You're going to have something to say about him, aren't you, in a minute? This is the story of a 30-year-old factory worker called Simon, who lives a solitary existence on a decrepit farm in the middle of a remote French village in the countryside. And he devotes his time to caring for his sister Estelle, who was left severely disabled from a childhood game that went horribly wrong. And it's essentially these two in this farmhouse and the way in which he treats or mistreats his poor disabled sister, and things kind of get more psychologically weird and fucked up and kind of cosmic as it goes on. It's a very, very weird film. Brad, what did you think of it?
I found it decidedly average, personally. Yes. I know that you were quite a big fan of it.
I liked it. Yeah, I liked it. I had, again, went in zero expectations, watched it on a link at home, and I mean, it's hard to say enjoyed for a movie like this because it's rough going and it's quite disturbing, but I think impressively so for me. I found it disturbing in the way that I find a lot of these French extremity films kind of nasty and gross and disturbing, I suppose. There's
a very human heart beating
Yes.
Along the narrative of this, as you say, cosmic, otherworldly.
Yes, I mean that is where it gets very weird. There's some otherworldly stuff going on as well.
Yeah, which I don't necessarily think. I don't think it's wrong. There are some moments in this film that are incredibly tender and incredibly sweet, and you can feel there's a lot of heart and love that have gone into them. But other things, I feel like he's doing them purely just to be shocking, or he's doing them just because he thinks it. Well, I mean, I know this because he's admitted it. Yeah. Just because he thought things were cool, and I don't necessarily think that that's the right way to be handling this subject matter.
No,
if you're looking at doing it, do that. Don't kind of stylize it for or make shocking or provocative moments just because you were like, just. Fuck it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I agree.
I feel like that loses a lens of credibility when you're looking at some interesting themes of, like, you know, wishing you could escape everything that you've done and being so bereft and racked with guilt because of what's happened to his sister and how he feels to blame for it.
Yes.
I think those are really interesting themes.
Yes.
But I also think a lot of it is just cold and absurd and very alienating.
Yes, well, very true. It's definitely absurd, and it gets more and more absurd. And it did lose me in the last act, I suppose. That's the thing, when it gets completely bonkers. But that kind of, like you said, that core brother-sister relationship for me was what gripped me for the majority of the movie until it all goes completely head fucky
bananas.
And so I for the bulk of it was into it, and I thought that those two performances from those two, Jean-Luc Couchard, who plays Simon, and Melanie Gaydos, who plays Estelle, I thought they were brilliant, and they carried it for me. But you're right, there are some weird moments and it's interesting that you say he just threw them in because he thought that would be cool, and I can believe that. And there are a few moments like that when I just unfortunately didn't quite fit with the rest of it. This, like
there's
you say,
some bizarre scenes where you're just like, why have you done this?
Yeah.
Like I find, I think we talked about it before we recorded. I find what he asked Estelle to do as the actress that's playing Estelle to do, I see why he's doing it, but I don't necessarily see that. Did he have to do it?
Yeah, I guess at the time I thought he was doing it for a reason, because to me it just added to the emotional impact of what she was going through.
Yeah, like the despair in which she herself finds herself in.
Yeah.
But I don't... part of me questions whether that's the reason he's doing it, or if he's doing it because he's like, this will weird people out.
This will be cool and shocking, yeah. It's like the S. Craig Zahler thing, where you think, are you just doing this to provoke, or are you doing it for a reason?
Because it did feel like not everything has a meaning and a purpose in this film, but maybe that's the point as well.
All right, let's move on.
Let's go on to my depression.
Let's go to your depression, yes. So next on the list, this is a biggie now. This is one of our big premieres of the festival. Take it away.
It's Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria.
Is there any point in us talking about the plot of Suspiria? I mean, for most people out there, I'm sure you know, it is pretty much the story of the original in terms of the actual plot, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's set in a dance school. Brad is he's not playing ball with this. So basically, you've got Dakota Johnson playing Susie, which is the name of the character in the original. She turns up at this dance school from America, and there is a coven of witches inside the dance school that are there to fuck things up, essentially. So in terms of that kind of very loose plot, it is Suspiria. But in terms of everything else,
it is not Suspiria.
It is not Suspiria. And again, we're coming to this from two very different perspectives here, because I wasn't the biggest fan of the original Suspiria, and for you, Brad, it is your favourite movie of all time?
Correct.
So how did you feel about the remake?
Luca. All right. I'm going to try and keep this as succinct and less ranty as possible.
Yes, we will keep this brief because also, just FYI, me and Anna are going to be doing a big spoilerific episode in a couple of weeks. So,
we're going to gloss over this. He changes up a lot of the narrative.
Yeah.
I think some of the things that he changes up are quite interesting. I think he's dealing with some more interesting themes of motherhood, of female sexuality, of inheriting a past or inheriting the future from the people of the past, which is a recurring theme that we're seeing.
Yep.
He changes pretty much everything from the narrative beats of Suspiria to the location of the dance academy to entire characters disappearing to new characters coming in. Lots.
Yeah. Also, the color palette, the visuals, the soundtrack, it couldn't be more different.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much trying to distance himself from the original, and I think that's an admirable thing, but I think the film only really works when it's close to to being like an Argento movie. I think the best scenes are the scenes, for me, that are most sort of manic or crazy, where they feel Argento-y.
You're totally right. It's so true.
All the bits he's added, I said in my written review on Letterboxd that he's talking an awful lot, but he's not really fucking saying anything.
No, you're absolutely
personally.
Right.
Now, I know a lot of people have called it a masterpiece, 5-starred it, and I know a lot of people have one-starred it and called it absolute garbage. I won't name names, but you know who you are. We've spoken about it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I think there are elements of it that work really well. There are moments of genius in it.
Yeah.
There are moments of beauty and of poetry, but he also fucks up a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
For me,
I agree. I mean, I pretty much agree with you completely there. I would go bang in the middle. I would say it's like a 50% a great film, 50% really dull
and frustrating and annoying.
And you're absolutely right. That a lot of that frustrating stuff is the stuff that he's added. The best scenes are the scenes that involve dancing and witches in the dance academy, and then a lot of the extra plotty stuff is superfluous.
Nonsense. It's superfluous. It's not required. And I said to you, I think on our first ever episode that we recorded together, that I was fucking pumped for this, and I was like, he's added an extra hour's worth of runtime. If he can fill out those narrative beats and make it more personal, more psychologically affecting, that I'm all for it. And that's what he's done, but he's done it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally the same. I'm eating my words now because I have been kind of down on the original Suspiria for so long by being so wafer thin on plot and basically being a bunch of nonsense that looks pretty. And this time,
too much plot.
I couldn't care less about the plot, and I just wanted the pretty dance scenes, basically. So I am eating my words.
You can't win. You can't win with Suspiria.
I can't.
It's a frustrating film, but it's also a great film at times.
Great. I think Mia Goth's brilliant. Dakota Johnson, Tilda Swinton in at least her main role is brilliant. You know,
I think there's some great stuff in it. I think Tom York's score is woozy and it's atmospheric, and it's a miles away from like the Sonic Assault that Goblin gave us, but I think it absolutely fits with the theme of the film. There's just so much shit in it that's not needed. Like, you could cut it down to an hour and a half movie, and I think you would have a better result. I don't think I'll watch it again.
But no,
I said that to you after it was done. I said I don't think I'm ever going to watch it again. But if you do want to watch it,
it will be out. Mubi are distributing it, and it will be out on the 16th of November, so very, very soon. And then that week, me and Anna will be discussing the movie in spoilery depth as well, in a whole sort of hour-long discussion.
Best of luck with that, mate.
Yeah, I know. We get into it. Anna's got notes. Yeah, so we've got plenty to say on that. All right, let's move on. We're gonna rattle through a few of the smaller movies now in the cult strands. So next one is a movie called Duplicate.
Single body multi-consciousness. You're really not him, are you?
I still don't get this. What are you?
I've been seeing his old girlfriend.
You have to tell him.
What have you been doing?
What's going on?
Okay, so Jonathan leaves the office every day at noon. When he gets home, he goes to bed straight away. Every morning he wakes up and there is a breakfast prepared for him, along with a video telling him about the second part of his day. So it transpires that Jonathan has got two consciousnesses in a singular body.
Yes, interesting. So he's basically like, he is twins sharing the same body, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah. So you've got Ansel Elgort at the centre of this, playing essentially two different characters at the same time, talking to each other via video, haven't you? It's quite interesting. What did you think of it?
I personally really liked it. I think it's a really interesting. It's not a horror in any regard. It's definitely more of a sci-fi genre piece in terms of sort of living out a disconnected identity and how you can feel disassociated with yourself.
Yeah,
is a good way of looking at it. I think Ansel Elgort gives a really good performance as both Jonathan and
John.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
I think he gives a layered performance. I think Bill Oliver, the director, has put together. It's not going to shatter anyone's world.
No.
At all. I don't. But I think it's asking some interesting questions about identity.
Definitely.
And how you can feel disassociated with your own self and not feel quite comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah. And it's kind of loneliness as well. There's a real feeling of loneliness to both these characters in completely different ways as well, which is quite interesting. You've got one that is totally kind of sociable and surrounded by friends, and yet feels kind of in some ways just as lonely as his brother, who is much more isolated and cut off from the world and stuff. And I found all that kind of really interesting. And Ansel Elgort it's the best I've seen Ansel Elgort in anything, to be fair.
Yeah, he's a bit of a meat puppet, to be fair, in most things. Do you know what I mean?
He is.
But I think he's really good in it. I think there's some interesting themes. It's not the most excitingly shot film.
No, it's quite conventional, isn't it?
It's procedural in it to a certain degree. Patricia Clarkson's in it though.
She's great. She's amazing.
How can you not love Patricia Clarkson?
I think for me it's absolutely solid, and I couldn't fault it in many ways, but I think for me it's quite a small film and a little bit drawn out. I almost think it could have worked better as like an episode of Black Mirror. Again, I keep saying that, or like a Twilight Zone story, or like a TV movie a little bit.
Because it's not particularly cinematic.
No.
Not a lot happens in terms of plot points or anything like that. It's just about this guy kind of juggling a split personality for all intents and purposes, and how it can all go a bit tits up.
There's no distributor yet for this, but I think this is a perfect film that would pop up on Netflix that you could watch at home. Probably.
90 minutes, just bang it out.
Yeah. So hopefully it will come up on some sort of streaming service sometime soon, because it's pretty solid, isn't it?
It is.
All right, let's move on to the next one then. Next movie is a movie directed by Daniel Goldhaber, and it is Cam. So Cam is the story of an erotic webcam performer played by Madeline Brewer, who finds her followers stolen by a sort of doppelganger who hijacks her channel and pushes the sexual envelope further and further and seems determined to destroy her life. So again, I think kind of similarly to The Duplicate, this feels a little bit it's quite a small movie. It could almost be a kind of TV movie a little bit, because a lot of it is essentially one actress on a webcam in her bedroom, and again this kind of duplicate character that she's kind of facing off against. So it's in a weird way quite a good companion piece to Duplicate.
They do kind of go hand in hand. Now this is the film I watched this film like a month ago now.
Yes, and I watched it 2 hours ago. So
we've really come at this at polar opposite ends.
Yeah.
I think Madeline Brewer in this film is fucking brilliant.
Yeah,
like she's
amazing.
So good in this film. I've called it, I believe here, a neon splashed De Palma Black Mirror amalgamation.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, and it taps into some interesting themes of online identity and how someone can become trapped in their own persona.
Very good. Oh, and actually persona, to get very wanky about it, there's a bit of Ingmar Bergman's persona in this.
There's quite a bit of different influences,
kind of fractured personalities and that kind of thing.
Because
as well.
You could look at it as is there really a duplicate, or is this just all her? Like, it's one of those sort of psychosocial commentaries, but it also could be quite a fantastical, like, oh, it is actually a doppelganger in it,
Yeah, exactly.
You can read it
the way that she basically lives a double life, doesn't she? She's this kind of sexy webcam girl, but then also you see moments of her amongst her family and playing with her little brother, and she's nervous and she bites her nails, and she is like an entirely different person to when she's performing on webcam. So it definitely it makes that literal, I suppose, doesn't it?
It does, and it was co-written or written by a former cam girl as well. And what I think it does really well is it's very positive towards sex workers. It doesn't shame or judge or be like, oh, look at what they're doing.
Yeah, totally.
It's very sex positive in that regard, and I think that's a refreshing take on it, because it would be very easy to over-sexualize or to cheapen what they do as for a living, because
definitely it's great. Actually, all of the female characters are really interesting, and then you get a couple of male characters who are awful. The one
shocker.
And it's brilliant. There's one particularly sweaty, awful man who is just the most hideous character I've seen on screen in a while.
He's a fucking dirtbag.
It's awful. It's made by Blumhouse, which usually is a good indication. It's a good stamp of approval, I think, as well. Blumhouse most of the time,
except right now.
Yeah, well, exactly. So yeah, overall, I was really positive on this. It was much better than I thought it was going to be. I think I was expecting it to be, we were saying before we started this, like a kind of Unfriended style. The whole thing is going to be set on webcam, and thankfully, I was quite relieved that it wasn't, and we got to see all these different sides to this really, like you say, really brilliant performance by Madeline Brewer, this really interesting character. So yeah, it's worth a watch. Again, unfortunately, we don't know if and when this is actually going to get a release, but I'm sure it probably will. Shudder, maybe. Yeah. Again, it's a Blumhouse film.
Shudder or Netflix. I don't think it will. I don't think it's big enough perhaps to get a cinema release.
No. Again, perfect movie for Netflix. Another Black Mirror-esque kind of
honestly,
story.
I think it would clear up on there, and I think it's just a really easy, interesting watch, and shows a side of people's lives that I'm not saying I've looked at cam girls before. Wouldn't like to suggest that, but
as we've already mentioned, we do not want to know about your internet history. We do not want to go through my internet
history, but I'm not. I was just researching for this podcast.
Oh,
okay,
yeah. Fair enough.
That's
fair
what
enough.
I was doing.
All right. Well, there you go. So that was Cam. So next on the list is a movie called School's Out.
Cue Alice Cooper music.
I know. Yeah, that's it.
C'est des ados, c'est tout. Il faut que tu comprennes ça. Ils aiment bien tester leurs limites. Qu'est-ce que vous préparez?
Vous voulez vraiment qu'il se passe quelque chose dans votre vie? C'est pour combler un vide?
C'est fini vos conneries là!
So Pierre Hoffman is brought in as a substitute teacher at the College St. Joseph's after the previous teacher, during a lesson, decides to throw himself out of a window for no reason.
Yes.
He then realises that he inherits a bunch of talented and gifted, overly smart, cocksure prick of children.
Awful children.
Who seem to be almost like Village of the Damned-esque.
It's very Village of the Damned, yeah.
Village of the Damned-esque pod people who are just too clever for their own good. And it's about him unravelling them.
Yeah.
And trying to work out what they're about, why they do what they do, why they are so smart, what motivates or drives these kids, because there are somewhat of an enigma to him. And I fucking loved this film.
I loved it as well. I'm so glad you liked it, because I absolutely was engrossed from start to finish with this. It stars Laurent Lafitte, who plays the main sort of teacher, and you might recognise him from the film Elle, Paul Verhoeven's film a couple of years ago, which he was so brilliantly creepy in that, wasn't he? And he's great in this as well. He's a really interesting character because his kind of... what's so good about the film is that it is very enigmatic, and you don't really know whether this is all his paranoia, and his obsession with finding out about these kids almost becomes creepy to a point where you go, do you even trust this teacher? It's it's one of those.
He himself is painted as quite a misnomer. We don't know a lot about him. We don't know his orientation, which is often played with.
Yeah,
we're not quite sure what that is.
He's kind of obsessed with his neighbour, isn't he?
He's obsessed with his neighbour, but then he's also no good at finishing his dissertation. Like he's kind of listless and aimless, and he doesn't have a clear direct path, so that all he does is these substitute teaching jobs. And when he comes across these children that are so focused, I think he becomes kind of enraptured in their sort of dedication to what it is that they're dedicated to, which we don't want to spoil for you, obviously. But I find, like we said with a couple of the other films, I think it's a really interesting look at sort of the millennial,
definitely
the millennial vices that the world that millennials are inheriting, and then the generations from there on, and kind of from anything from the environmental impact to the systemic government oppression to like myriad of things that it could be. I think it's an interesting look at how this generation feels disenfranchised with the people, the fucking baby boomers.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, mum and dad.
Yeah, it feels like quite an angry film in that way, doesn't it?
I think it's very angry at the generations.
But not in the same way that Assassination Nation is, where it's kind of in your face, on the nose, look at how much we fucked up the world. This is like very low-key and quiet and sort of...
unassuming, but it kind of gets under your skin, because you're like, I feel like they're not wrong.
Yeah. You don't quite know who to trust in it, and these kids are brilliantly, like you say, Village of the Damned is the perfect comparison. They're kind of emotionless almost, and super intelligent.
And so they're not to be crossed with, because they are some well organized people.
Yeah, they are, and they kind of hang around in a pack. And like you say, you kind of don't know, is this going to have? It is very much about right now in this generation in 2018, and there are touches on moments where they might talk about the environment. There are moments where they talk about sort of almost like neo-Nazist type stuff, or white supremacy, or there's Jewish characters that there's like hints of loads of different issues, but like you say, it just kind of like bubbles under the surface.
I think even isn't Trump on screen at one point?
Trump is on screen, exactly, but it never kind of really hits you over the head with it, which I quite liked. Yeah.
It just like kind of gets under your skin, and it takes its time really up until the final act, and even then, for it to really play its hand and be like, well, this is what they're actually...
Yeah, this is what they're up to.
You don't get that resolution, but I can imagine that if you're not buying it, you're going to check out.
Yeah.
But if you're invested and you want to know what was fucking wrong with these kids, then this is a really interesting French watch.
It is. It's very good.
We mentioned it's French.
Oh, it's French. Well,
it's French.
I thought by naming the main character as Pierre, played by Laurent Lafitte, I might have given it away, but
it's French.
It's French, by the way. It's very good. General release. So again, we don't know about a UK release yet. It is going on general release in France early 2019. So hopefully that might mean it will come here at some point shortly after.
Yeah,
but we don't know yet.
Yep, I don't know where it would go. If I had to hazard a guess, Shudder.
Maybe, yeah.
That's a bit too good for Shudder. Sorry,
it is. Well, it's almost a bit too subtle, isn't it?
But it's also too genre for like Curzon.
Yeah.
It's a weird one. I don't know where it will land.
No.
But it's good.
It's very good, very good. It's worth seeking out. So that was Schooled Out. Let's head into the next one, which is called Cannibal Club. This is the story of Otavio and Gilda. They're a very super wealthy couple living in Brazil. They're a kind of part of the Brazilian elite, and they happen to have a habit of eating their working class employees. And they belong to a club of other super wealthy people, and they call themselves the Cannibal Club. But shit starts to go down within this Cannibal Club when Gilda accidentally discovers a big secret involving kind of one of the head honchos of the Cannibal Club, and suddenly this married couple start to believe that their lives might be in danger, and they actually then have to kind of rely on the loyalty of some of their help and some of these working class people who they previously have kind of treated like shit and literally killed and eaten
like meat
in order to survive. So again, it's kind of like there are some messages here that are quite on the nose, I think, about class.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The problem is that it beats you over the head with a very obvious metaphor, and it doesn't stop.
No, it doesn't stop. Again, this could have been a good 15-minute segment of a horror anthology or something, I feel like.
But I mean, it's only 81 minutes long.
Yeah.
So it kind of... But the problem is, the narrative doesn't have enough meat on its bones. Or bite in its satire.
Oh, God, here we go.
I think it's very...
It's broad, isn't it?
Broad. I think it's interestingly shot. I think the final shot in the film is brilliant.
Yeah, loved it.
Like the best thing about it is the last shot.
Yeah.
But everything else, it's kind of nasty and visceral. Some of the violence or the cannibalism scenes are quite effectively done. But for the most part, I was like, who gives a shit?
It's like it's weird because it's probably more so than any of the other films, apart from maybe the next couple we're about to talk about. It's very kind of on the surface. There's not more to it than what you get on screen, really, and it is just very much kind of. It has its tongue in cheek all the way through as well. It's quite camp.
It's
almost.
silly and playful.
Yeah. It's schlocky and camp and silly, and like you say, it's shot well, and I think the performances are good, but it's just there's not much more to chew on, I suppose. Oh, exactly. There you go.
Not a lot to digest.
Oh, God. Somebody stop us.
We haven't even started the zombie series yet. Coming soon, January. Look forward to about 8 of these puns an episode.
Yeah, can't wait. So there you go. That is Cannibal Club. I feel like there's not that much more to say about that. Let's move on to the next one, which is The Nightshifter.
So Stenio is a Nightshifter at the morgue, and has the ability to communicate with the cadavers in almost a Sixth Sense-y type way, which allows him to, you would suggest to maybe do good or like help people find peace by tying up loose ends, but he doesn't really do that. Instead, he gets embroiled with I'm gonna say Brazilian gangsters.
Yes, yeah. It's kind of like gang warfare, isn't it? Basically, he kind of gets involved in,
and it becomes a revenge plot because there is some familial issues at home.
Yes,
but then the film shifts gears and becomes a possession curse movie.
Yeah.
And then it goes weirder, and then there's some political commentary in it as well.
Yeah,
they're very. I think there's a lot of political statements made within it, but they're not explicitly spelled out in the narrative. But it's kind of Sixth Sense, but then like the corpse of Anna Fritz, or they remind me. There's been a lot of those sort of cadaver movies recently.
Yes.
In the last couple of years,
I wanted it to be more like the Autopsy of Jane Doe. I wanted it to be like a kind of bit more contained,
or like a cerebral thriller stuck within that singular place. But it goes out into the slums of Brazil and gets wider and wider, and becomes
it does.
Almost a curse movie, so to speak. It kind of goes a bit grudgy, a bit insidious-y towards the end, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre movie.
It is, isn't
it? Tonally all over the place.
It is all over the place. Yeah. I've got to say this is one of my least favourites of the bunch. I think I wanted it to be, the kind of opening setup of this cadaver getting wheeled in front of this guy and then kind of waking up and talking while he's all kind of cut open and guts spilling out. I thought, this is going to be really fun and interesting. And then it just kind of sprawls out into, like you say, millions of kind of characters and plot points, and it kind of tonally shifts, and it feels almost like the genre shifts. It's very odd, isn't it? It's trying to achieve a lot, I suppose.
I know, and then the problem with that is it then ends up being 110 minutes long.
Yeah, too long for something like this.
That's my complaint for most of these movies, but this one, you really feel it.
Yeah, you do.
Because it's so sprawling and because it's trying to tackle so many different genres, and I don't think it does any of the genres particularly well.
No.
I think it tries to do the talky cadaver bit, and then it tries to do like a possession curse, but it also tries to be a gangster movie. It also tries to be a familial drama, or, a cheating, cucking plot.
All of that stuff is just a bit not done very well.
There's kids in peril, there's a new love interest, there is a lot of stuff being thrown into this pot, and I don't think most of it works. It's my least favourite film of the festival. While I don't think it's altogether terrible, it's the weakest of the entire thing for me personally. Because it's just a bit of a mess.
I mean, I would say this might be worth a watch if it comes on a free streaming service, because it's not badly made, I don't think. It's just a bit all over the place with what it's trying to. Maybe it's just a bit too overambitious. Like you say, if it's trying to cram in a lot of Brazilian political subtext in
allegories
there as well.
And stuff, maybe. I think at this point they're just trying to show like how corrupt Brazil is.
Yes. All right, let's move on to the next then. So this one is oh god. So this is May the Devil Take You. So this is the story of this is an Indonesian horror movie, and I would say actually probably the most, at least of the ones I've seen, the most out and out horror movies of the bunch. You know, it's purely a movie set to scare you, I suppose. So this is the story of a young woman called Alfie. She's got a sort of very dark family history. Her dad, essentially, you see at the beginning, performs this ritual, almost basically sells his soul to the devil for lots of money and wealth, and then goes off, leaves his family, remarries some, younger, prettier model, starts a new family, but then something happens to him. This kind of fate catches up with him, and this daughter, who's been estranged from her dad since he became wealthy, has to kind of join forces with her stepbrothers and sisters, and they return to his old villa in the middle of the woods and have to kind of figure out exactly what happened to him and why he is now on his deathbed, essentially. And there's some sort of ancient curse that has kind of claimed him and now is also coming for the children. And it is, I think you said, didn't you, it was basically like The Grudge meets Drag Me to Hell or something like that.
Meets The Evil Dead.
Meets The Evil Dead, and that is exactly what it is, really. And I think, it to me felt like a movie directed by somebody like James Wan or somebody. It was kind of absolutely hitting you over the head with jump scares every 2 minutes. And the same predictable jump scares,
Yeah, there's nothing that you haven't seen anywhere else. There's not, there are literally moments in it where I feel they're like direct rip-offs of like some of the films we mentioned. There's a entire scene towards the end. This isn't really a spoiler, but it's exactly the same as the Drag Me to Hell scene.
Yes, they're
they're like exactly the same.
Yes.
Like, except Drag Me to Hell is more fun.
Yeah, definitely. And if I had to see one more kind of long, black-haired, screaming ghost character pop up in somebody's face, it felt like it happened every 5 minutes.
But it's just the Grudge wearing a red dress. Yeah, like, it's all it was. And it's quite... this one was quite a disappointment because it's directed by Timu Techihado.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's the best I'm going to do with that.
Yeah.
Who did the Safe Haven segment of VHS2 with Gareth Edwards.
Which was
Evans,
incredible.
Which is like the best bit of VHS... any of them.
Yeah.
He also did a film called Headshot, which was quite fun. And I think he's also just released that film that's come out on Netflix, The Night Comes for Us.
Oh, yeah.
That's him as well. That came out yesterday.
Well, there you go. Well,
today's the 20th of October.
Just
to clarify. But yeah, and also he did Killers as well, which is great as well.
Yeah.
This is middle of the road stuff.
It felt the same experience for me as watching The Nun a couple of months ago, where I was like, oh, well, here comes another fucking jump scare. You can see it coming from a mile off.
Yeah.
And there were no surprises in it at all, basically. It was very by the numbers.
No, this is once again quite linear. I think it depends. I know I've some people that I'm aware of hated this movie.
Yeah.
And I also know some people that love this movie.
Yeah.
But I'm somewhere in between. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
But I've seen it all before. I've seen it. So, like it's the typical setup of like the cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
Except it's the villa in the jungle.
Exactly. For me, this is my least favourite of the festival. And only because it's not particularly like it's terrible. And some of the other movies are clunkier in some regards. But I think this movie felt like it had the least ambition. Like it was purely setting out to make you jump. And if it doesn't make you jump...
then what's the point?
You're just a bit bored, basically, which I was.
And I guess mine is my disappointment is because of who the director is. And the hopes that I had pinned on it.
Mm-hmm.
Just it didn't land for me. But I think some people in my screening when I went to ran out because it was too intense for them.
Oh, well, there you go.
I mean, it's not quite like the fainting.
No.
In Lords of Chaos. Did we talk about that?
Yeah, we did.
Thank God.
We did. Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it absolutely will work for some people, I'm sure. And it's the sort of movie that you'd get teenagers go with their friends and watch it, and you jump and scream, and it's a popcorn movie, I suppose.
But it's got a massive thing going against it.
What is that? It's Indonesian.
Yeah. The audience in which you're targeting.
Yeah.
Ain't gonna watch it because it's got subtitles.
Yeah, very true.
Because they want Halloween, they want
very true.
They want those kind of films. They're not want to read, and also because it's so steeped in mythology and familial ties and curses. I don't know if that necessarily speaks to the contemporary audience, especially when it comes to those kind of pacts with the devil. In those regards, I think that it will be a tougher sell. I guess this one would probably, but judging by most of his work ends up. Probably going to be on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah. And I suppose maybe if you're a bit less jaded than we are in terms of the genre, you
might enjoy it.
If you don't see some of those frights coming, it might be a bit more enjoyable, I guess, because it's kind of solidly made, but it's just very by the numbers, I guess. All right, we're nearly there. We're on to the next movie. This is the only one in the cult strand that I didn't get a chance to see, so I'm handing this one over to you.
So, this is the Indian morality tale, Tumbbad.
विरासत में मिली हुई हर चीज पर दावा नहीं करना चाहिए। मैं नहीं करूंगा तो कोई और कर लेगा। लालची है तो यही तो गुण है मुझ में।
Directed by Rahi Ani Bave. India, 19th century, on the outskirts of a decrepit village called Tumbbad, lives Vinyak, the stubborn, conniving bastard son of the village lord, obsessed with a mythical ancestral treasure. He suspects the secret lies with his great-grandmother, a cursed witch. Confronting her finally puts him face to face with the guardian of the treasure, an evil, fallen god. What starts with a few gold coins quickly spirals into a reckless, perpetual yearning spanning decades. As Vinyak's greed escalates, it all comes crashing together in an epic reckoning. It's a bizarre tale of greed and avarice, effectively.
Okay. Wow. I mean, it's pretty epic.
It's out there.
It's out
there, to say the least. It's more, I would say, plays more like an action film than a horror, although the creature design, and I've got to say, the special effects and the set design and everything like that, really, really good. Like,
nice.
Surprisingly good. Narrative, not so good. Especially in the second act, it goes from less Elm Street to more Wall Street.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it becomes more, I say, it's a morality tale, effectively.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this is going to pop up anywhere, this one?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't know how or where it would go. You know, like sometimes bizarrely, a lot of sort of Indian and Bollywood cinema ends up on Netflix.
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if it turns up there.
You never know. Okay, well, there you go. So that is Tumbbad. And that was the last movie in the cult strand until we get to Mandy, at least. So we've got one more movie to talk about before we get to Mandy, and that is Peter Strickland's In Fabric. Okay, so In Fabric, obviously this is directed by Peter Strickland. If anyone doesn't know, he's the genius who directed Barbarian Sound Studio and most recently Duke of Burgundy. And what was the name of his first movie? It's got a funny name, hasn't it? I can't remember. Catelyn Varga, that's the one.
Yeah.
And this is a really interesting, weird, out there story, but it's essentially, the synopsis as IMDb calls it is, it's a haunting ghost story set against the backdrop of a busy winter sales period in a department store. A cursed dress passes from person to person with devastating consequences. So before we get into this, I'm going to play you a little bit of my chat with Peter Strickland, because I think what's interesting is that even I think Peter himself can't really tell you much about what this film is or it is about. I think it's more about a mood or a feeling than it is about a story. But I'll let him explain it in his own words, and then we will share our thoughts on the movie. So here is my chat with Peter Strickland. Okay, welcome Peter Strickland. Hello. Hello. First of all, congratulations on In Fabric. I absolutely loved it.
Thank you.
It's premiering at London Film Festival tonight as we record this. Do you get a chance to sort of see other films at the festival when you do this kind of circuit, or is it literally you're sort of torn from place to place?
No, I don't really get time. No. When I was not making films, I had time to watch films.
Have you pretty much gone from one project to the next?
Well, actually, there was quite a gap for this one. It was a 4-year gap. So, you know, it feels like I've had a 4-year holiday, but no, it's just been non-stop. I've been doing radio plays. I did 3 radio plays. I did pop videos, and so it's just been constant. You know, I'm not complaining. I mean, I love doing this, but it's been constant work.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been busy. What about the? I'm very excited. I've got my ticket for Barbarian Sound Studio on stage next year as well. Right. Have you? How did you feel about that? About the idea of this? You know, coming to the stage, and what's been your involvement in it, if any?
0.
Oh, really?
I mean, they've asked me to get involved. I don't want to get involved because not that I'm against what they're doing, but I'm very, very militant about writers being writers, and they shouldn't be interfered with. I resent people interfering with what I'm writing, and I would do the same for someone else. So I've passed the baton. It's their work. They're adapting it. They've given me the right to interfere, but I feel I'm quite purist. You know, I think they have to do it on their terms, and that's it. But yeah, I'm excited about it, of course. I'm very flattered as well.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel weird just kind of handing your baby over to someone else to do.
Well, it's not my baby because the baby's done. It exists. So it's a cousin of the baby.
Yeah.
It's not related to me. Well, it is, but you know, it's not.
Yes. Yeah,
directly. I see an adaptation as a cousin. My job is to make the film and protect it as much as possible, and then once that's done, it's out in the world.
So tell me a little bit about In Fabric then. Again, for people listening who may not have seen this movie yet, could you sort of give me a little bit of the setup of what people can expect from this movie?
Well, it's about shopping. It's about clothing. I don't know if it's really about anything. I mean, I guess I think if you're looking for a message, you might not want to see this film. It's really, I think it's just going into a world in which I love. You know, the world of department stores, which are disappearing. Each store is its own thing, and so really for me, it was about going into a world I love and exploring characters I love. If you want a plot, don't bother seeing the film. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to spend time with characters and fall in love with them. And I think the important thing when writing it was to not want to kill them off.
Yes.
If I wanted to kill them off, I was doing something wrong. Because when I wrote the first draft, I quite enjoyed killing the character. When I had to kind of rethink it, this is not right. If I'm enjoying it, no, I'm going to completely scrap that character. Right, do it afresh. I'm trying to go back to my childhood and how I saw the shops, how I saw the mannequins which were guarding the shops at the windows. And, and the mystery of those dumb waiters. What is down there? Do the staff sleep down there? Are there sweatshops down there? So really just tapping into that. And again, there was a logic in the sense of everything is anchored to real life, but there's no logic to the dresses' actions. But then we thought of everything on a dial, that everything was from 1 to 9, roughly. Like social realism was on 0 or 1. Complete surrealism was number 10. Nothing was on number 1. Nothing was on number 10. It was the houses were 1 or 2.
Yeah.
The store was on number 8. It was like an elastic band. Everything had to be linked to real life. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. I mean, it's like in Eastern Europe, people regard Kafka as a social realist.
Yes.
But don't see him as an absurdist. An absurd. You know, there was a relation to real life. I mean, surrealism, when it's surrealism for its own sake, it doesn't interest me so much.
And it's that really interesting juxtaposition, like you say, of the home life. You know, Marianne Jean-Baptiste's character, I think, it feels like something from something more social realism, I suppose, in comparison to what we get in the department store. And was that kind of, again, sort of specifically, you were kind of having those sort of two different worlds or those two different ends of the spectrum collide?
I suppose so, yeah. Yeah. I just love those scenes when Marianne's playing off Fatma in the store.
Yeah, it's
with,
brilliant.
Marianne's kind of dowdy coat. And but again, it's that idea of transformation. You'd go into those shops during your lunch break in your workwear, feeling a bit dowdy.
Yeah.
And you'd come out of a changing room feeling transformed, and your posture would change, and your expression would change. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's a very human need to transform. I mean, by watching films or listening to music, I am transforming. It's it's a very human thing.
I've heard the film described as a horror movie. Do you see this as a horror?
Well, I'm paying tribute to it. I'm reluctant to call it that, not because I feel I'm superior to it, but only because I feel we don't deliver it enough. There are moments in which we are going into that territory, but I feel if you want a classic horror, I feel, again, maybe you shouldn't see the film. And again, I love horror, so I'm not being superior to it. I think that it's elements of the ghost story. I was thinking more the uncanny. I got into these quite late. I got into these M.R. James Christmas BBC adaptations.
I was just about to say, it really reminded me of Whistle and I'll Come to You.
Oh, that was an influence, actually.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I can just take that sensibility, but losing the misty beach, losing the haunted house. Yeah. There was not one in that one, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yes.
And I think take the M.R. James sensibility and take it into the most prosaic setting possible, which is the January sales.
Yeah.
And find the uncanny within the prosaic. So find, those long queues at night when you look out the window when you're doing a stock take, the mannequins, and just try and... It was almost like a school exercise.
Yeah,
let's, what they used to do at school with it, right? Take something like this, see if you can glean something out of it somehow.
Yeah. They do have this kind of unique tone and feel to them, those ghost stories for Christmas, don't they?
Yeah. No, I mean, I used to love those. And it's an old horror film. And again, is it really horror? It's this film called Cannibal of Souls.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful. Yeah.
Which I love the driving scenes. I could watch those on a loop. And again, with Marianne, we spoke a lot about that film.
Oh, great.
The stillness of the driving. It's not realistic driving. It's just still. You're not going like that, moving around. It's...
Yeah.
The artifice of it as well, with not in a kitsch manner, but because I think these department stores were artificial, and again taking the artifice outside of that as well. And so that was. I mean, there were not many film influences. I mean, real life was a huge influence on this film. Plus, Kienholz, the sculptor, who made these mannequin sculptures. But I think Carnival of Souls was, one of the few references to this.
What is your favourite? Do you have a favourite horror movie?
I mean, off the top of my head, probably the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but mainly because of the soundtrack.
Incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like if Stockhausen was sniffing glue. It's kind of, it's really, I don't know, it's feral. I think that's the word for it. It's wild, feral music concrete. It's unlike anything I've seen since, really. And the film is pretty good as well. But I think the sound, I just adore that soundtrack. The louder, the better. But I like more delicate horror films. I love Halloween, the first one. That was almost like a ballet.
Have you caught the new one yet?
I haven't seen anything recently. But I love a lot of the Italian horror as well.
Yes.
I think they were exceptional. And what I loved about the Italians was they always had this counterpoint. They had incredibly emotive, beautiful music with very horrific images.
Yes.
I think the ultimate example would be the cannibal genre with Riz Ortolani's soundtrack to Cannibal Holocaust.
Oh wow, yeah.
If you play that soundtrack in isolation, it feels like a romance film. You would never think it's to this horrific, unpalatable stuff on screen.
I know. I'm sure you've been asked this already, but did you take inspiration from the Italian sort of giallo and that sort of filmmaking for this one?
Not really. I mean, I've been asked that a lot.
Yeah.
I did a junket the other week, and pretty much every question was about that. I mean, I can see why I'm asked that.
Yes.
Especially given my second film was paying tribute to that, and I was racking my brain trying to work out why does that keep coming up, and I worked it out. I think it's because the department stores I love.
Yeah.
I love them for the same reason I love Italian giallo and Italian horror, is because it's flamboyant. There's a very strong production design element.
Yes, it's lavish.
It's lavish. It's heightened. The colors are lurid. It's this artifice.
Yeah.
It's theater, and those giallo films had all that. That's why I think people are making that connection, plus obviously because of Barbarian. But no, I mean, I would happily openly say it if giallo was an influence, but it just wasn't. I've seen a lot of those films, so maybe subconsciously stuff creeped in.
Yeah.
But like with Fatma, I wrote with Fatma's voice in mind, and I think a lot of the time when you work with an actor, you take over, you carry something through from the previous film. So for the Duke of Burgundy, she was very different from Barbarian.
Yes.
There was like a wonderful camp quality to her voice, and I extended that for this one.
Yeah.
So that was very much with her in mind. But obviously, when I work with her next time, I'm going to completely discard what we've done on this film and go to another direction. But again, maybe picking up an element of her performance and taking it somewhere else. So definitely working with actors. I think working with the same actors can really help with the whole, writing process.
Yeah, incredible performances across the board, actually. And the character of Sheila it's Sheila, isn't it, who Marianne plays?
Yes, yeah.
Sheila is a wonderful character, and like you said at the beginning, you don't want to lose her in a way. You didn't want I felt for her all throughout her story, I suppose. And it's another thing I love about the Duke of Burgundy as well. I guess it still feels, sadly, quite unusual to see stories about women, and particularly maybe women who were a little bit older, middle-aged or whatever. And I just wondered, what is it about telling women's stories as opposed to men that sort of fascinates you?
I don't know. I've been in trouble for that many times. I've been told off for doing that.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, many times.
But why? Because it's
because
great.
I'm a bloke. Simple as that.
Right. Okay.
I mean, I think Athena Rachel Tsengari made Chevalier, which is all about men. And I thought it was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
She was absolutely spot on. So I like it when outsiders. So I make no apology. I like it when outsiders.
Yeah.
Like when Pressburger, a foreigner, makes films in this country, or Pawlikowski.
Yeah.
When women make, Bigelow, she makes great films about men.
Of course, yeah.
I don't know why. I guess I've always found it easier to write middle-aged women. I don't know why that is.
Mm-hmm.
What was very important for me was to write a love scene with Marianne and Barry, because quite often you don't see middle-aged people making love.
No.
And if you do, it's done as a bit of a joke. And I wanted to reverse what you normally see. So I wanted Marianne and Barry to play it completely straight and very tender. And with the younger couple, Reg and Babs, play it for laughs.
Yes.
So like a complete reversal of what you'd normally see in a Hollywood film. I have no idea why. But I guess, I write for women in their 50s. I guess that's my default. I don't know why that is.
Well, it's great.
Yeah.
and the men are interesting characters as well, because again, I don't know whether you're consciously trying to say something about masculinity, but when you look at these male characters in the film, the kind of laddish ones on the stag weekend, or the kind of maybe slightly, quote unquote weaker men like Reg, or some of the disastrous dates that Sheila goes on, the bosses at the bank, all of this kind of thing, very kind of flawed, shades of masculinity, I suppose. Again, was that kind of something that you were thinking about consciously when writing a lot of the male characters?
I mean, they're flawed, that is for sure. It's interesting because I got into an argument with someone who called me a misogynist.
What?
And I said, well, have you seen the male characters in this film?
Yeah.
Are you just going to ignore those? So, I mean, women are behaving badly in this film. But to be honest, it was interesting. I got into a discussion about this, that someone was attacked for portraying a bad woman. And I won't name the actor, but she was telling me about this. And surely feminism is the freedom to have women in all their, whatever characters or whatever you call it. Try to write what I see, really.
Right. Yeah.
And what I see tends to be men being very competitive.
Yeah.
And also, I fly, because I live in Hungary, I fly a lot to Hungary on a Friday, because when I work here, I fly back on a Friday.
Right.
And Hungary is a big stag hotspot.
Of course it is, yeah.
So I see a lot of
Brits abroad.
A lot of very interesting behaviour on the airplane.
God.
Very interesting behaviour, actually. And flying back on a Sunday is even more fascinating, because everyone's,
dying.
pretending they had a dirty burger when they're actually throwing up. It was just a dirty burger.
Yeah, that's all it was.
Just a dirty burger. I mean, I really don't want to make points when I write. It's just exploring character. But I think you, as a male, you are aware of certain traits within our, without being too general.
Yeah. I've heard you talk previously about the idea of ASMR, in relation to your movies as well. I wonder if you could just explain a bit about what that is and sort of how that sort of plays into your work.
Well, it's an autonomous sensory meridian response to certain sounds, very tactile sounds, and I wasn't aware of it until I was doing radio plays, and my producer Russell Finch asked me why do I always have whispering in my stuff, and I never really thought about it. And a lot of the music I responded to by people like Robert Ashley or Alvin Lucia, Costin Mirianu, they all had whispering and very tactile sounds, and I always struggled with an intellectual response. And when Russell mentioned this, I thought, I looked it up on Wikipedia, and I thought, oh my God, this explains my whole life in a sense, and my work and my listening. And it's not an intellectual response; it's a visceral response or a sensual response. It's not erotic, because people mistake it with the erotic. I think the danger is, prior to this film, I did it unknowingly, which I always think is a good thing. People might beg to differ, but I'm a big believer in doing things without knowing why. This is a knowing use of ASMR, and which is probably why I won't ever do it again.
Right.
But I got into those YouTube videos. I didn't know they existed. It's interesting. When you put a name to a kink, you lose some of the mystery, you lose some of the joy. Because I always had it, and I just assumed everyone else had it. I just didn't really speak about it. Oh, it's really nice when people would put football stickers in the Panini things, and I never say, oh, it's a really nice sound you're making there. I don't know. You're just one of those things, So then I realised, actually, no, not everyone is like that. But I thought, a bit like the Duke of Burgundy, it would be quite interesting if, Duke of Burgundy, everyone's into bondage.
Mm-hmm.
Quite interesting if everyone's into ASMR in Fabric. And poor Reg, just somehow, whenever he does his washing machine mantra, everyone goes into a trance.
It's brilliant. It's so fun. Is that why he's called Reg Speaks as well? So.
No, Speaks. I mean, I realise it kind of comes. I just love the name Speaks.
It's just a funny name, yeah.
But I think so. Yeah, I guess I deep down I wanted to make it like one of those YouTube videos, but obviously a very extravagant version because this costs a lot more money than those YouTube videos. They probably cost £5 to make. This cost a lot more, but. So everything, there's a whole world, with the shop muttering, the catalogue page turning, the pencils, the graphite against paper. It is designed. It's a film designed to go to sleep to, basically.
Fantastic, yeah. And did you the seed of this idea then, was it born out of kind of images and sounds pre-story, I suppose, and characters and that kind of thing? I mean, do you kind of have in your mind how this film is going to look and sound whilst or before you're even writing it?
Kind of. I mean, the ASMR thing came in... When did it come in? I guess it came quite early, actually, because Tim Gain, who did the soundtrack, he was sending me a lot of drones when I was writing. And actually, I had no idea at that point. I wanted someone to start me off. Because usually I listen to music when I write. It gets me going.
Yeah.
But then I become attached to the music. And it becomes a real burden for the musicians. And I think it's much healthier to not give musicians references as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So he gave me a lot of these drones. And I just started writing washing machine dialogue to it, a bit like a rap, really, and I think organically things came from there. I mean, a lot of images came from secondhand clothing, bodily fluids, bodily stains, and the idea of how we respond to them. How Gwen's lingerie, Vince is so obsessed with her lingerie that he'll have his face printed on it.
Yeah.
Whereas Sheila, she won't even wash it in the same machine as her clothes. She's so disgusted by it. So I'm fascinated how objects have a power. They have a haunting. Sheila's dead mother, the shirt of a dead relative can bring tears to someone's eyes. Mm-hmm. So and how we feel when you put clothing on, how we feel empowered, how our posture changes, how our expression changes, how if you have body dysmorphia, you feel worse about yourself if you put something on. And it's just, Babs is plagued by this distorted image of her body. Reg is plagued by this fetishistic need to see women in tights, and it's played for laughs to some degree, but you see these characters are completely haunted by, and they can't really help each other through it. You know, Babs doesn't see how profound Reg's fetish is. Reg doesn't see how profound her body dysmorphia is. He just kind of like, oh God, she's just being ridiculous. So really, I mean, I guess the film was like bullet points. You know, you're using a genre framework, but you really want to just open up ideas about clothing and objects, and how objects are not just objects; they have an alchemy to them. They have because of the human presence. Yeah. Because of the stories behind objects. Because when you buy something from a chain store, you know, it could have been made in a sweatshop. There's a story there. There's a story of exploitation. How in a charity shop you're buying the clothing of a dead person. There might be some stained sweat or smell or something, some trace to the past. And that activated the whole story, really, that, oh my God, you know, this shirt is secondhand. And, you know, there's a whole story behind this shirt. Yeah. So I think, you know, clothing is haunted.
It's fascinating. I would love to talk to you all day, Peter, but I'm going to have to wrap up. I just want to ask you first, lastly, what have you got coming up next? Is there anything you can tell me about anything in the pipeline that might be coming up?
I've been working on this film called Night Voltage for 6 years now. It was loosely based on a lot of the gay nightclubs in New York around 1980. Right. Like male, trying to make an all-male film. But nobody would tell me off about the male gaze that way. No, I wrote this 6 years ago. This is before I was getting told off for this kind of thing. So I was watching a lot of gay porn, stuff like Bijou by Wakefield Poole, which I think is just a psychedelic masterpiece. And again, I think it's just finding stuff that people don't know and taking that aesthetic and saying, actually, look at this. This is actually, you might write it off because it's porn, but actually there was a kind of alchemy in a lot of this stuff. So, but it's actually really, really difficult getting funding for these things because just the nature of these subjects. You know, they are niche subjects. So it's unknown.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
The amazing Peter Strickland. I think he is like one of the most odd but brilliantly odd people I've ever.
He's
I've
a
ever heard
deranged
speak.
madman.
He really is.
But I love him for it.
I love him so much. In Fabric, then, what did you think? Did you come to this as a Peter Strickland fan first?
Of course. I love his last two movies.
Yes.
I am more of a Duke of Burgundy fan than I am a Barbarian Sound Studio fan.
Me too.
I love Duke of Burgundy so much.
Yeah.
So this was a cheat really for me because I saw In Fabric back in Toronto.
Yes, you
so
did.
I've actually now seen it twice because I was obviously going to go see it again this time around, mainly because I saw it at midnight in Toronto and was very pissed and thought probably best to watch this with a clear mind as well.
What a weird film to watch when you're drunk. It
was hard work. It wasn't that much easier when I was sober, if I'm honest with you. But what he's created is a bizarre ode to the death of the high street.
Yes.
I think it's phenomenally weird concept, but I love him for it.
I absolutely love him for it as well because and that is genuinely what he wanted to make, as he mentioned in that interview. He's like, it's a world that doesn't exist anymore, the world of the high street and department stores and the mystique
and
behind
catalogues
the mystique behind mannequins and dumbwaiters in department stores and all this stuff that apparently used to kind of creep him out and mystify him when he was a child, sort of being dragged around the shops.
So
with
he
his
just
mum.
decided to fuck us all up with it, basically.
It's amazing, and he talked quite a lot as well in that interview about the idea of is it ASMR?
Yeah, so it's all autonomous sensory meridian response.
Yes, which he basically says is what this movie is, really. It's more about that than it is about the story. It's more about an experience and as he, in his words, a movie to go to sleep to.
That's what he said in Toronto as well.
It's brilliant. I mean, I almost feel like he's downplaying his own movie by saying that because I think it's fucking great and it's a romp. I think it's brilliant.
I think it's definitely tinged with a Giallo-esque vibe to it,
which he denies.
He denies because when he was questioned about it, he said, someone said, what movies did you draw influence from? Obviously Argento and Bava, and he was like, Lethal Weapon.
Yeah. I said Lethal Weapon, brilliant. And actually, interestingly, he cited the M.R. James ghost stories as well. We kind of wanted to go for a sort of the white sheet in Whistle and I'll Come to You. Basically, he was kind of referencing that with the red dress and stuff. So in his head, this kind of is his horror movie. But,
it's not
also, I feel like it's misselling it to call it a horror movie at the same time.
Yeah, because if you go in expecting a horror movie, you are going to be bitterly disappointed. Because it is more funny than it is anything else.
I laughed all the way through.
Really playful. It's absurd. It's the conversations and dialogue. I mean, the stuff with Steve Oram and Julian Barrett.
Yes, amazing.
Is
amazing.
Just bizarreness personified. And I don't understand how his brain works.
No,
no one makes films like him. Imagine Yorgos
Yes.
Peter Strickland collabed on a film.
Yeah, exactly.
Be the weirdest thing you've ever seen, but it will be a masterwork.
Yeah, that's it. And they're both just such interesting people. I could watch anything they give me, basically. I do think and his films are weirdly kind of, I guess this links in with kind of his sensibility in the ASMR thing, but his films are always kind of weirdly sensual, don't you think? Even though at the same time, they're absolutely not.
No, like someone's cutting up a catalogue with scissors and there's like really satisfying sound, but at the same time, you're like, this is kind of a sensual experience.
Yeah. And, dressing a mannequin in this movie, it becomes very overtly sensual.
Far too sexual.
It's absolutely hilarious. And what I love as well is and I talked briefly in the interview about it, is the clashing of these two worlds and these two types of movies. You've got the main sort of character played by Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who kind of performs like she's in a social realism, like in a Mike Leigh film. And then you've got Fatima Mohammed, who's a kind of a well-known, long-time collaborator of Peter Strickland, who is like she's in a completely different world, let alone
it's completely otherworldly, her performance. But the grounded reality of the relationship with Jean-Marie Baptiste and her son, and the conversations and dialogues and those dates.
Oh God!
Oh my God! Those dates. The 10% if we share a pudding. Got some really exciting, really exciting discounts. Like it's so good.
It's so good.
Because it's all uncanny, but only fractionally. Like you can totally imagine these people existing.
Yes.
But then everything else that's being asked of you to understand, a haunted red dress, you just got to buy into. And if you don't buy into that, you're out of this film. Like there's
absolutely
no reason for you to bother watching it if you're not going to go along with its camp weird ride.
Yes.
But it's very... I saw someone else say this online, but they're entirely right because it's from an area that I'm from. Like it's very Reading.
Yes, exactly.
It's really
it's like a
Reading.
Middle England town, isn't it? Like a proper town with a high street with a Maplins and it's like that kind of a place, isn't
exactly.
it? Yeah.
And, I still, I mean, I'm a bit younger than Strickland, but not by much. I definitely remember like high street shopping and kind of like even like, do you remember like the mystique of Argos?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What lurked beyond the back?
Yeah.
Turns out when I was 18, I got a job at Argos.
Oh
part-time.
no! It pulled back the curtain.
I saw the wizard and his gears, and it fucked everything for me.
Yeah.
But that mystical, like,
exactly,
an Index.
Yeah.
Remember Index?
I remember Index.
Take that.
Yeah. And I remember there was a Debenhams where I grew up, and it had that kind of weird sort of dumbwaiter style lifts. And it did have this kind of weird mystique, so I kind of get what Peter Strickland
I get what he's going for. It's just a bizarre thing to be like, I'll make a whole film about it.
I just love it. And actually such an entertainment. This, for me, out of all the ones we're talking about, because the favourite is my favourite of the festival, but In Fabric is probably my top of all the ones we've been discussing.
Which is actually in the official competition.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. I so far, I think Peter Strickland can do no wrong. He's brilliantly weird.
3 for 3. 4 for 4.
I do think that I kind of love Marianne Jean-Baptiste's character so much that I kind of wanted more of her. I don't want to spoil it, but unfortunately she isn't in as much of the film as I wanted her to be.
No, and I agree. A lot of people have criticised it kind of derails when that occurs.
Yes.
But I also kind of love what it does as well.
Well, there's another character called Reg Speaks.
And Reg Dunnoff speak about washing machines.
This film is also about washing machines as much as it is about department stores as well.
It's more about, I think I would argue you see more, there's more speak and shots of washing machines than there is of anything else. But that also feels into that ASMR sort of thinking because of the repetitive droningness of...
Yes. Yes.
Like,
so what you've got is this kind of weird... absolute mundanity of English life mixed with, I don't care whether he can deny it, but mixed with Italian giallo-esque filmmaking, mixed with kind of weird M.R. James ghost stories with apparently Lethal Weapon and,
as an influence.
And it is this absolute mishmash of everything, but it kind of works. I think it's amazing.
I think it's his, I would say it's his most accessible film, but I don't know if it is. No. It's his funniest film.
It's his funniest film. Yeah, it is. It's his. Yeah, in some ways, it is his most accessible film because it is the most fun to watch, I suppose.
Yeah. So with Barbarian Sound Studio, it was more, shocking at moments, and then Duke of Burgundy was sensual and lush, and
also really funny in places.
But more psychosexual and woozy. Yeah. And then this one is just almost played for laughs.
Yeah. It's almost like you're watching something that Julian Barrett or one of those actors would be in. It's like watching Garth Marenghi or I don't know. There are moments even that are like something out of Gavin and Stacey or something. It's like a British sitcom almost.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
But brilliant.
Yes, we've probably not really done it justice trying to describe it.
It's very difficult.
Just go see it. It's been picked up by Curzon. It will be released early 2019, so it will be out there in cinemas. Everyone needs to check this movie out. It is fucking bonkers. I loved it. And that's pretty much it for all of our spoiler-free recommendations.
Correct.
If you had to pick one, or is it going to be the one that we're about to talk about? Which is your favourite?
Of the cult films?
Yes.
My favourite is Mandy.
Hey, well, there you go. Well, what a brilliant segue. I think of the cult films, my favourite is probably Lords of Chaos, actually. I was a big fan of Lords of Chaos. But there are some excellent ones. I'd also recommend Dragged Across Concrete, if you can handle the dodgy politics. Assassination Nation is great. Schools Out is really interesting. Gay, porn, giallo, slasher, knife plus heart. You can't go wrong. There's a lot of good movies. But let's finish then with your favourite. This movie's out in cinemas right now. This is Mandy. Okay, this is your spoiler alert. We are going to be talking about Mandy in spoilerific detail as the movie is already out in cinemas. So a lot of people we know have already seen it. A lot of people have very strong opinions on it. This is the new movie starring Nick Cage, directed by Panos Cosmatos, who had previously directed Beyond the Black Rainbow. But what is Mandy about? Brad, take it away.
So Red Miller and his girlfriend Mandy, the titular Mandy, live in a secluded cabin on Crystal Lake.
Yeah, Crystal Lake.
Yeah. It's all feeding into the things I like.
Yeah.
where Mandy takes the eye of a charismatic cult leader named Jeremiah, who must have her. When she rejects his advances, things go wrong.
Yes, they do.
And they unleash Nicolas fucking Cage in one of his bonkerest, craziest, outlandish, garish, but also emotionally touching and soulful.
Yes.
And engaging performances that I think he's achieved in the last few years.
Definitely.
Since Wicker Man 2006, which you knew I was getting into.
I knew you were getting into. I got to briefly interview Panos Cosmatos, and that's already out, the interview. But he talks about, he thinks the Wicker Man remake is brilliant, and he thinks it's one of his favourite recent Nick Cage movies.
And he's right.
Yeah. You two could be best friends, I think.
Apparently so, yeah.
But I was saying, I think this is actually one of Nick Cage's genuinely best performances. And because you get the mad Nicolas Cage in the second half, but you also get kind of low-key, subtle Nicolas Cage as well. Which
there are some moments of like genuine vulnerability that I don't think we've seen in his acting in quite some time.
Since like the 90s, it feels like.
I mean, he has wacky, weird one-liners at the beginning as well, you know, but for the most part, he's just utterly in love with Mandy.
Yes.
And you really feel that, and I really buy their connection that Jeremiah ruins.
Yes. But we should say, so this movie is, you know, you've summarised the plot there, but it's not really a conventional... It's not a conventional movie, is it, by any means, in terms of the way the movie looks, the sound, the pacing. The thing that frustrated me a little bit with this movie is that everyone talks at this speed the whole time. It's like, and again, I watched this when I was a little bit tired and a little bit hungover, and I was like, get on with it.
See, bizarrely, my review actually ends with me saying, this was made for me. Because it is.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you love about it? Why did you think this movie was made for you?
So, I think stylistically, if you're going to strip away narrative, which shouldn't be too hard, if you're looking at it from a purely aesthetic point of view, I think Panos makes some of the most beautifully striking imagery.
He absolutely does.
Of any filmmaker, and I think he wears his influences on his sleeve a lot, and you can definitely see a lot of other directors' work in the work that he does. But I think what he does is he builds worlds that if you do not want to become a part of that world, you will find it incredibly cold, incredibly alienating, and you will feel disconnected. We've seen a lot of chat on the Evolution of Horror Facebook group.
People have really been divided over it.
Well, I would say the split is about 80-20 hate.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Everyone, like, I feel like, but we've already been joking because I'm never positive about many films. But this is one of the rare occasions where I'm going to go out to a bat for a film that everyone fucking hates.
Yeah, but then actually, generally outside of people on this podcast, it does seem to be getting a lot of love as well. Actually, I think it's got something like a 95 on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and that kind of thing. I think people are embracing it and people are celebrating Nick Cage's performance. It's got an amazing score by is it Johannes? What's his name?
Johannes Johansson.
Yeah,
So it
Johannes
was his
Johansson.
last score before he killed himself.
Yeah, and it's an incredible score. Absolutely, I've been listening to the soundtrack since watching it, and I think that's the thing. Like with this movie, it's kind of, for me, it's not quite the sum of its parts, but it has incredible parts. I think that everything you said is true in terms of it looks incredible. I think the movie sounds incredible. I think there are moments of genius from Nick Cage's performance. For me, it didn't quite add up to be the masterpiece that some people think it is, but I thought it was just fine. And I'm seem to be one of the only people that I'm just somewhere in the middle, where I'm like, it's good.
You're non-committal. See, for me, I think I've called it a prog metal descent into the deepest, darkest depths of despair, where losing love means losing it all.
Oh, lovely.
That's how I feel about it. So, as someone who's had their heart broken enough times, I know.
Yeah.
Poor me. I'm still single, by the way, lads.
Yeah.
Lads,
Lasses.
Honestly, at this point, I'm not.
Anyone
fussy.
will do.
Just love me. I think for me, the way the film connects with me is that level of despair when you lose a person that you love.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship dying.
Yeah.
That can be, familial contact or whatever, just a connection with someone that is suddenly and shortly dispersed, and you no longer have that, and the kind of listlessness and the kind of the spiral, the downward spiral that some people can take when you lose love.
Yeah.
And I think this is a representation of going further and further down the rabbit hole. You know, I've certainly rock bottomed enough times to know that you can really fuck yourself up if you're heartbroken.
Yeah.
And I think this is my interpretation of the film, although there is a lot of other things he's dealing with in terms of cosmic shifts and darknesses within people, and you know, I think it primarily boils down to a love story about a man who's lost the woman he loves.
Definitely. And actually, and you know, that kind of the way that it takes its time to build that relationship between the two of them is really good, and
it's
really
an hour.
It's needed as well.
It's a half of the film comes, you know, with you understanding that these two love each other, but you don't even really get told why.
No, yeah.
And a lot of their conversations don't particularly exude love.
You
know, there's, you know, the conversations they have are almost more abstract, and they're looking more at sort of, you know, weird books and mirrors and texts and things like that. But all you know is that he loves her.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think it's you either feel this or you don't, I suppose. And that's why I know there are some people that, you know, on the Facebook group said, like, I walked out partway through it and stuff, because I think you're going to know from the way this movie stylistically works, you're going to know within the first 20 minutes, half an hour, if you're in or out. Yeah, if it's for you, definitely. Because for me, the film that it reminded me of, or at least the director it reminded me of, was Nick Winding Refn, and that kind of over-stylized, almost kind of out of this world kind of feel to it, of movies like The Neon Demon and Only God Forgives. And to me, I find those movies a little bit insufferable. I kind of find myself kind of rolling my eyes at them more than I do appreciating them. And I did, again, while there were moments in this that I loved, there were moments when I was like, oh God, get on with it. And,
see, there was never a point where I guess the best way to look at this is that I drank the Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
I was in for every single weird moment with tigers.
Yeah, the tiger.
You know, and the bizarre biker gang, the Road Warriors-esque biker
wasn't
gang.
a fan of that either.
You know, the Evil Dead references, the Friday the 13th references.
Yeah, there's definitely Evil Dead, and there's definitely some Bruce Campbell to his
discussed
performance.
with Panos, and like, you have to understand from my personal perspective that all those things speak to me as a person.
Totally.
And it's metal as fuck.
Yeah.
So that makes me happy as well. You know, and Beyond the Black Rainbow, the film that Panos did beforehand, is equally as difficult. I would argue more difficult.
Yeah, I would say so.
More difficult to get into than this. I think this is an easier watch, even though it's not particularly easy. But I think it's one of those films that, and it's such a cliche trite thing, but you experience a film.
100%. That's what this is.
You don't watch this. You either drink, you sign up to the cult, or join the Mandy cult hashtag.
Nice.
Or you don't. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. You're not wrong for thinking it.
Yeah, exactly. I totally get that, because I have that with certain filmmakers like David Lynch. I'm on board with anything he gives me, but a lot of people are like, "What the fuck is this?" You know, Twin Peaks had like an hour-long episode of nothing happening in black and white, or somebody sweeping a floor. Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? It's either you're on board with it or you're not, I suppose. And I mean, I did love certain moments of this though, and I really loved. Who's the actor? Is it Linus Roach who played
his
Jeremiah?
Jeremiah, was it Crow or Sands or whatever his name is?
He stole it for me in a way, apart from Nick Cage. But he really, I loved all the moments when he was on screen.
He's super Manson-esque, right?
Completely Manson.
Failed musician, kind of. I find his performance, like, I couldn't think, because obviously I know Panos said it in your thing, but Nick Cage was supposed to be the cult leader, and then someone much younger was supposed to be Red Miller. I can't imagine anyone but Linus Roach doing that.
No.
Plus, you'd have to find someone who'd get their dick out, and Chris Pine. I think Chris Pine was busy at that point. So, you know.
Oh God! And also, it had to be somebody who had a dick that Andrea Riseborough would laugh at as well.
I mean, any man, I think Andrea Riseborough would laugh at.
Yeah.
No one is really talking about her in this film.
No, you're absolutely right. I was going to say that, because obviously everyone is just talking about Nick Cage, really, but she's brilliant. She's brilliant.
Great in it, and like she's such a uniquely. She and herself exudes an ethereal quality that I think really lends itself to the film's atmosphere or its tone, and no one is talking about that.
And again, her hair and everything, and her kind of gaunt, pale face. She looks like one of the Manson family. I think,
like her glazed over eyes, the kind of like 1,000-yard stare. She's not given a lot to play with.
No, she's not
really. But I think what she does is just, as a conduit for tragedy, she's really good.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing. She's almost a bit of a device, isn't she? But less so because they give her and Nick Cage so much in that first half. So it doesn't feel too like she's just a MacGuffin.
No, because for the first hour of the film, Nick Cage is barely in it.
Yeah.
It's Mandy's movie until we have effectively like the relay race.
Yeah.
And then why so many people are more connected with the second half of the film is where it goes fucking bananas.
I don't know how I feel about some of the second half. I kind of like, I don't know, but there were some moments when, for instance, the big chainsaw fight when Jeremiah gets his like ridiculously huge chainsaw out and stuff. I was kind of just, for me, it just goes into too camp,
too silly. You think
it's
at odds tonally with.
For me, at its best was kind of that middle point where Andrea Riseborough's been kidnapped, the kind of moment with Jeremiah, the burning, the Nick Cage going into the bathroom and having a meltdown. For me, it's that middle point where the kind of first section ends and the second section begins, which is where I was
those
really
first
into
initial
it.
heights of mania.
Before
it then plateaus. And by plateaus, I mean it plateaus on a steady stream of mania until the end.
Yes, exactly.
Where it's,
I suppose it's more the points of true horror there in the middle. I suppose, predictably the parts I enjoyed most
are the most human aspects of it. The bits that connect with you most are the less fantastical and the more reality.
I think so. I mean, what did you think of that? Because in the end shot, you actually see that they're like on another planet, are they, or something?
Well, no. But are they?
I don't know.
But that's the thing. Well, no. So it's set in the Mojave Desert.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, you can try and unpick what he's trying to say in terms of, is this otherworldly? Is it not? I look at it as based in reality, but a very coke-addled, LSD-addled version of reality.
Yes.
I absolutely believe that this is occurring on Earth.
Yeah.
But that everything, there's a cosmic darkness inside you, can't you see that?
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
Like there is something, the universe has got its say in these matters.
Mm-hmm.
Is how I'm reading it. And you can't escape fate, and you can't escape your destiny on what she was always destined to be a martyr. Red was always destined to be a warrior, or whatever you decide that he is, and Linus is, or Jeremiah is always supposed to be God.
Yes.
Or for whatever example of God you want it to be. It's but I guess those parts of it are circumstantial to me.
Mm-hmm,
they are things that allow you to pick at or not pick at. You can take them at face value, or you can not, and that's really up to you and how you choose to interpret the film.
Yeah.
For me, I'm looking at it as a very basic narrative. He loves her. She's taken away.
Yeah.
Here's the motherfucking pain.
Yeah.
That's all. That's how. And if I watch a film like that and try and ignore the kind of, I've been reading up on some things here. They were saying that there's a variation of a quote by Joseph Campbell, who's like a mythologist, that psychotic drowns in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is all about psychology of the future, lessons from modern consciousness research, and it's saying there's a fine line between psychosis and spirituality.
Right. Okay.
So you can look at it in that text, that the kind of the mania that you're seeing is, where does religious fanaticism start, and where does peak insanity begin?
Yeah.
So I guess that's one of the more interesting points of it.
Yeah. absolutely.
But that once again, not everyone's going to give a shit about that.
No, and I think that's it. It's like I guess, like a lot of movies like this, or even it's got to hit you on a subconscious level, I suppose. It can't. It's got to hit you in the heart more than the head, I guess, hasn't it? I feel like it's got to, like we keep saying, it's got to wash over you as an experience. I think if you're having to struggle and think about it to enjoy it, then you're probably not going to enjoy it.
Yeah, if you need more narrative beats.
Yeah.
And that's nothing wrong with needing them or wanting them, because when characters, I mean, this podcast would be a nightmare.
Yes, exactly. Maybe we should have had that whole discussion in that speed. Yeah.
Well, this would be like about 18 hours long. But yeah, no, I don't disagree with the people that don't care for the film at all. I think you take from it what you want. With any film, I don't know why we're limiting it just to Mandy.
No.
But for me, it's a sum of all the parts that I love. It's an homage to a lot of filmmakers that I love. I think there's definitely nods to Lynch. There's nods to Jodorowsky. Yeah. I think there's nods to Sam Raimi and all of those songs. And then the score and the soundtrack, very much my vibe. It's all neon and synthy and
totally
metal as fuck. So and it's got Nick Cage going mad. So honestly, I think there was a very slim chance that I was going to hate this.
It's very true. It's
literally,
very true.
It could have been Nick Cage farting at the screen for 2 hours, and I'd have been like, masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean, he was
breathtaking.
He was brilliant in it, I've got to say. So and also I would say to anyone who hasn't seen it, hopefully you have if you're listening to this, because we've gone into all kinds of spoilers. But I would say see it on a big. Absolutely, if you're even considering seeing it, see it on a big screen with a good sound system, because that is, again, it's that word. It's an experience. I think you've got to see it that way.
I think it would definitely lose. Well, I know I've watched it both ways.
Yeah,
it loses something when you watch it on TV.
Definitely, I can imagine.
And that's why the Prince Charles Cinema has sold out like 2,000 tickets for the first weeks. That's a lot of tickets for a film that's had little to no promotion.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. It's amazing. Good for Panos. I liked him, and he had the most crazy laugh I've ever. Did you notice? He'd talk a bit like this for a while, and then he'd go like that and laugh like that.
That's always good to be a bit excited.
I loved him. Yeah, it's like he had those two kind of Nick Cage halves about him. I liked it. Okay, well, there you go. There we have it. I'm going to run through our list just one more time. So here's the list. For anyone who's just drowning in a sea of recommendations here, I'm going to go through them again from the beginning. So we've got S. Craig Zahler's Dragged Across Concrete. We've got Assassination Nation. We've got Knife Plus Heart, Lords of Chaos, All the Gods in the Sky, Suspiria, Duplicate, Cam, School's Out, Cannibal Club, The Nightshifter, May the Devil Take You, Tumbbad, In Fabric, and Mandy. There you go. Well done, LFF. It's quite a list.
That's like a fraction of everything else they've shown.
Yeah, insane.
It's crazy.
Absolutely insane. Well, should we put a little letterbox list up or something? Because again, it's easier that way, isn't it? People can look at.
Either you or me will do it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of films there that for people to remember. But overall, we've been down on a few of them, but overall, that's only because the quality has been so fucking high. I would say.
I would agree.
Across this festival,
none of them are terrible. There are just some that didn't live up to potential, or when they pale in comparison to some of the other excellent selections of programming that they've put forward.
Exactly. So there you go. Are you going to just hibernate away and not watch any films now for a while? And
mate, I'm going to see one right now.
Oh yeah, okay. Never mind. I'm ready to have a little break from films for a bit. Well, I say for a bit, for about 3 days probably, and then I'm going to watch Apostle and talk about that on the podcast.
I've got so much to catch up on. It's driving me mad. I've got Apostle, Hill House, and The Night Comes for Us.
Oh yes.
And then I've got 6 cinema releases this week.
Okay.
And I've still got another day and a half for London Film Festival.
You got a lot to get through. We better get on that. Brad, thank you so much for joining me once
Pleasure,
again.
mate.
Where can people find you if they want to find you online, social media?
You can find me at Had Branson on Twitter and at Splatter Patter on Letterboxd. I'm not going to plug it as much as I usually do now because I'm getting quite a.
Hey, it's working.
It's really worked. So thank you to everyone that's bothered following me since I last bitched about it. You've increased my ego exponentially, which will be nothing but bad for all of us. But thank you anyway.
Love it. Amazing. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a big thank you to my guest, Brad Hanson. It's been an incredibly intense couple of weeks of film watching, and I'm ready to sleep for a few days. But get in touch. Did you get a chance to see any of the films at London Film Festival? Or if there are any films in particular that you're dead excited to see, I'd love to hear from you. Get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @evolutionpod, on Facebook, that's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. You can also find us on Letterboxd @evolutionpod, and on Instagram @theevolutionofhorror. And don't forget, all of those movies that we discussed, we will make a list of them on Letterboxd. So if you follow me and Brad on Letterboxd, you should be able to access that list from today. But that's it for now. Join us again very soon for another Shocktober edition of the Evolution of Horror.